The moment Landon Pierce stepped onto the 43rd floor that night, he knew something was wrong. Through the glass walls of the emergency boardroom, a young woman stood alone at the head of a table covered in scattered documents and abandoned coffee cups. Her executives had already fled. The lawyers were packing their briefcases. In 6 hours, the stock market would open, and Sienna Vale's billion-dollar empire would collapse into nothing. But Landon saw what nobody else did. Buried inside the financial reports lying inches from the shredder was proof that someone she trusted had been destroying her company from the inside all along. If you're watching from Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, or anywhere else in the world, drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. And if you enjoy what's coming, hit that like button. It means everything. The fluorescent lights on the 43rd floor of the Apex Tower hummed with the kind of low, persistent buzz that made Landon's jaw ache after 8 hours of pushing a mop cart. His shift started at 11 p.m. and ended whenever the building was clean enough that the executives wouldn't notice people like him existed. Tonight, that meant sometime around 6 in the morning, assuming he didn't get pulled into an emergency cleanup on one of the lower floors. He didn't mind the work. Not really. It paid $4 more per hour than the grocery store where he'd worked during the day, and the overnight supervisor didn't ask too many questions about why a guy with a finance degree from Northwestern was scrubbing toilets at 32. Most people didn't want to hear about the medical bills. They definitely didn't want to hear about the funeral costs or the collection agency calls or the fact that his daughter's asthma medication cost more per month than their rent. Landon pushed the cart past the executive suites, barely glancing at the mahogany doors with their engraved nameplates. He'd stopped reading them months ago. It hurt too much to remember what his own office used to look like. Smaller, sure, but still his. A place where people called him Mr. Pierce instead of the night guy. That's when he heard the voices. At first he thought maybe he'd misread the schedule. Sometimes the lawyers worked late, burning through billable hours while their assistants ordered takeout and pretended to care about merger clauses. But this didn't sound like a normal late-night session. The voices coming from the largest conference room were sharp, frantic, layered over each other in a way that made his stomach tighten. He should have kept walking, should have turned his cart around and found another floor to clean until whatever corporate drama was unfolding had finished. But Landon had spent 3 years analyzing financial reports for mid-sized investment firms before everything fell apart. He knew the difference between a routine meeting and a disaster in progress. The conference room door was half open. Through the gap, he could see at least a dozen people crowded around a table designed to seat 30. Most of them were standing. A few had their phones out, typing furiously. 2 men in expensive suits were shouting at each other near the windows, while a woman in her 60s tried to pull them apart. And at the head of the table, standing perfectly still while chaos erupted around her, was Sienna Vale. Landon recognized her immediately. Everyone in Chicago knew Sienna Vale. At 26, she'd inherited her father's struggling tech firm and turned it into a billion-dollar powerhouse in less than 4 years. The business magazines called her a prodigy. The gossip sites called her cold and untouchable. Either way, her face had been on enough covers that even a guy who spent his nights mopping floors knew exactly who she was. She looked smaller in person. Not physically, she was tall, probably 5'9" in the heels she was wearing, but something about the way she held herself made her seem fragile, like she was holding her entire body together through sheer force of will. "This is insane," one of the men shouted. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a tie that probably cost more than Landon's car. "You can't seriously be considering this." "I'm not considering it," Sienna said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "I'm doing it. Unless someone in this room has a better option in the next 4 hours. The better option is to let the company restructure under Chapter 11, a woman with a sleek black ponytail snapped. She had a tablet in her hands and kept jabbing at the screen like she was personally offended by whatever data it was showing. "You file bankruptcy, you keep partial control, and you live to fight another day. That's how this works." "That's how it works for you," Sienna said. "You'll all walk away with golden parachutes and consultant contracts. I'll lose everything my father built." "Your father built a failing company," the silver-haired man said. "You're the one who expanded too fast and burned through the cash reserves. Don't pretend this is about honoring his legacy." Sienna's expression didn't change, but Landon saw her fingers tighten around the edge of the table. Get out, Richard. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out. You're fired. The room went silent. Richard stared at her for a long moment, then let out a short, bitter laugh. You're firing me? Sweetheart, in 6 hours you won't have a company left to fire anyone from. He grabbed his briefcase and walked out, brushing past Landon without even glancing in his direction. Two of the other executives followed him, muttering to each other in voices too low to hear. The rest stayed, but their faces had that look Landon recognized from his own worst days. The look of people already planning their exit strategy. Sienna turned back to the woman with the tablet. Show me the numbers again. Sienna, we've been over this 10 times. Show me. The woman sighed and pulled up a spreadsheet on the massive monitor mounted on the wall. Landon couldn't see all the details from where he was standing, but he didn't need to. He'd seen enough failing balance sheets to recognize the shape of one from across a room. Revenue down 40%. Operating costs through the ceiling. Debt obligations stacking up like a house of cards about to collapse. The only serious offer we have is from Hexagon Industries, the woman said. They're willing to acquire the company for $800 million. That's a fraction of what we were worth 6 months ago, but it's the best option on the table. Hexagon, Sienna repeated. The same company that's been trying to buy us out for the past 2 years. They have the capital, they have the infrastructure, and they're offering to keep most of the staff on during the transition. They're vultures, Sienna said. They'll strip the IP, gut the research division, and sell off the pieces within a year. Maybe, the woman said, but at least you'll walk away with something. If you wait until the market opens and we announce bankruptcy, you'll get nothing. Landon's hand tightened on the mop handle. He should leave. This wasn't his business. These weren't his problems. But something about the spreadsheet on the screen kept nagging at him. The numbers didn't look right. Not wrong exactly, just wrong in a specific way that made his analyst brain start turning over possibilities he didn't want to consider. He took a step closer to the doorway. One of the executives, a younger guy in a perfectly tailored suit, noticed him and frowned. Can we help you? Everyone turned to look. Landon felt his face go hot. Sorry, I'm cleaning. I didn't mean to interrupt. Then don't, the man said. This is a private meeting. Landon nodded and started to back away, but his eyes caught on the monitor again. The numbers were still there, bright and damning against the dark screen. And now that he was looking at them head-on instead of at an angle, he could see what had been bothering him. The vendor payments were wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not in a way that would jump out during a casual review. But there were 3 line items near the bottom of the operating expenses, small enough to get lost in the noise, that didn't make sense. The amounts were too round, too consistent, and the company names attached to them were generic in a way that set off every alarm bell in his head. Wait, Landon said. The man in the tailored suit glared at him. Excuse me? Those vendor payments, Landon said, pointing at the screen. The ones to Apex Solutions, Titan Edge Consulting, and Redline Systems. They're fake. The room went dead silent. Sienna turned to face him fully for the first time. Her eyes were gray. Not blue, not quite silver, but something in between. They looked exhausted. What did you just say? Landon's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat, but he forced himself to keep talking. Those 3 companies, they're not real vendors. Look at the payment schedule. Same amount every month for the past 18 months. No variation, no invoices attached, no services rendered. And you know this how? The woman with the tablet demanded. Because I used to do this for a living, Landon said. Financial analysis, fraud detection. I've seen shell companies before, and those are textbook examples. The young executive laughed. This is ridiculous. Sienna, this guy is a janitor. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But Sienna wasn't laughing. She was staring at the screen now, her expression unreadable. Pull up the full transaction history for those 3 vendors, she said quietly. Sienna, do it now. The woman with the tablet hesitated, then started typing. A new spreadsheet appeared on the monitor, row after row of identical payments stretching back nearly 2 years, $12 million per year, $36 million total. Jesus Christ, one of the lawyers whispered. Sienna's face had gone pale. Who approved these payments? They're coded under operational expenses, the woman said, scrolling through the data. Approved by Richard Chen, the silver-haired man who'd stormed out 20 minutes ago. And routed through... The woman's voice trailed off. Oh no. What? Sienna demanded. They're routed through offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, same bank structure that Hexagon Industries uses for their acquisitions. The pieces fell into place so fast it made Landon dizzy. Richard wasn't just embezzling. He was sabotaging the company deliberately, funneling money out through fake vendors and routing it to the same people who were now offering to buy the wreckage at a fraction of its value. It was elegant in a sick kind of way. Destroy the company from the inside, tank the stock price, then let your partners buy it cheap. Sienna turned to look at Landon again. This time her expression was different, not grateful exactly, more like someone who'd just realized they were standing at the edge of a cliff they hadn't known was there. "What's your name?" she asked. "Landon Pierce." "Landon?" She said it slowly, like she was testing the weight of it. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure the numbers don't make sense," Landon said. "I can't prove anything without access to the full accounting system. But if I'm right, someone's been bleeding your company dry for almost 2 years. And if you're wrong, then I'm just a janitor who doesn't know what he's talking about." Sienna studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to the woman with the tablet. "Karen, I want full access to the accounting system. Everything, every transaction, every approval, every wire transfer for the past 3 years. That's going to take hours." "Then we better get started," Sienna said. She looked at Landon. "You. Stay here." What? "You said you used to do this for a living, so do it now. Help me figure out who's been destroying my company." One of the other executives stepped forward. "Sienna, you can't be serious. We don't know anything about this guy. He could be the only person in this room who isn't lying to me," Sienna snapped. "Everyone else, get out. I want this floor cleared in 5 minutes. Karen, you stay. Landon, sit down." The executives filed out slowly, shooting uncertain glances at each other as they left. The lawyers packed up their briefcases and disappeared without a word. Within minutes, the massive conference room was empty except for 3 people: Sienna, Karen, and Landon. Landon stood there holding his mop like an idiot, trying to process what had just happened. Sienna pulled out a chair and gestured to it. "Well, are you going to help or not?" He set the mop down carefully and sat. Karen brought over her laptop and opened up the company's financial database, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Numbers flooded the screen. Thousands of transactions. Millions of dollars moving in and out of accounts Landon couldn't even begin to parse without more context. "Start with the shell companies," Sienna said. "Trace every payment. I want to know where the money went and who authorized it." Landon pulled the laptop toward him and started working. It had been 3 years since he'd done this kind of analysis, but the muscle memory came back faster than he'd expected. He built pivot tables, cross-referenced payment dates, flagged anomalies in the approval chain. Karen fed him access to subsystems he didn't even know existed: procurement logs, vendor onboarding records, email archives. The picture that emerged was worse than he'd thought. Richard Chen had been running the scheme for 23 months. He'd created 3 fake vendors, backdated their contracts to make them look legitimate, and routed the payments through a network of shell corporations that eventually funneled into accounts controlled by Hexagon Industries. But he hadn't been working alone. 2 other executives had signed off on the payments at different points in the chain, providing cover and making the fraud harder to detect. "This is insane," Karen whispered, staring at the data. "Richard's been with the company for 15 years. He knew Sienna's father." "That's probably why he was able to get away with it for so long," Landon said. "Nobody questioned him because nobody thought he'd have a reason to steal." Sienna was pacing now, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "How much?" "36 million, Landon said. "Give or take a few $100,000. "And Hexagon? They're definitely involved. The final accounts tie back to a subsidiary they control. I can't prove they orchestrated the whole thing, but the connections are there." Sienna stopped pacing and turned to face the windows. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered in the darkness, indifferent to the small human drama playing out 43 floors above the street. "If we go public with this, the stock crashes anyway," she said quietly. "Investors don't care if we were sabotaged. They'll just see a company that couldn't protect itself." "If you don't go public, Hexagon gets away with it," Landon said. "And if I do, I lose everything trying to prove it." Landon didn't have an answer for that. He was a guy who mopped floors. He had no idea how to navigate corporate warfare or SEC investigations or any of the other nightmares that came with exposing fraud at this level. All he knew was that the numbers didn't lie, and someone needed to do something about it. Sienna turned back to face them. I need more proof, something concrete, emails, recorded calls, anything that ties Richard directly to Hexagon. That could take days, Karen said. We don't have days. Then we work faster. Sienna looked at Landon. Can you do that? Can you find something the regulators can't ignore? Maybe, Landon said. But I'd need full access to everything. Email servers, financial records, communication logs. And I'd need time. You've got until 6 a.m., Sienna said. That's when the market opens and this whole thing becomes public, whether we're ready or not. Landon glanced at the clock on the wall. It was already 1:30 in the morning, 4.5 hours. That's not a lot of time. It's what we have. Sienna pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. I'm authorizing emergency access to all company systems under your credentials. Karen will set you up with a workstation. Anything you need, you ask for it. What about my shift? Landon asked, then immediately felt like an idiot for even bringing it up. Sienna almost smiled. Consider yourself temporarily reassigned. They set Landon up in a small office 2 doors down from the conference room. Someone, probably Karen, had brought him a coffee and a sandwich from the executive kitchen, though he barely touched either. The coffee went cold while he tore through email archives, searching for any correspondence between Richard and Hexagon's acquisition team. It was slow, painstaking work. Richard was smart. He'd used personal email accounts for most of his communication, keeping the corporate servers clean. But people made mistakes when they thought they were safe, and Landon knew how to find those mistakes. At 3 a.m., he found the first one. It was buried in Richard's deleted items folder, a forwarded message from 18 months ago, sent from his work email to a personal Gmail account. The original message was from someone named Marcus Webb at Hexagon Industries, laying out the basic framework of the scheme in language just vague enough to maintain plausible deniability. Looking forward to our partnership. Once the quarterly numbers reflect the adjusted expenditure model, we should be positioned to move forward with the acquisition at a more favorable valuation. Adjusted expenditure model. That was the fake vendor payments. Favorable valuation. That was the tank's stock price. Landon copied the email and kept digging. By 4 a.m., he'd found 6 more messages, each one slightly more explicit than the last. Richard had gotten sloppy as the scheme progressed, probably because nobody had questioned him in over a year. The final email, sent 3 weeks ago, was almost laughably direct. Phase 3 complete. Stock price down 47% from peak. Board is panicking. Recommend moving to acquisition offer within 30 days. Landon printed everything and walked back to the conference room. Sienna was still there, sitting alone at the massive table with her head in her hands. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment he saw past the polished exterior to the exhausted, terrified woman underneath. I found it, he said, setting the stack of printouts in front of her. She read through them slowly, her expression hardening with each page. This is enough? It's enough to start an investigation, Landon said. Whether it's enough to stop Hexagon's offer, I don't know. It'll have to be. Sienna pulled out her phone again and started typing. I'm sending this to our securities lawyer and the SEC. By the time the market opens, Richard and everyone involved will be under investigation. What about the company? The company's still in trouble, Sienna said. Even with this evidence, we're still 40% down in revenue and hemorrhaging cash, but at least now we have a fighting chance. Landon sat down across from her. For what it's worth, I think you'll figure it out. Why? Sienna asked. You don't know me. You don't know anything about how I run this company. I know you didn't run when your entire board told you to, Landon said. I know you fired your CFO in the middle of a crisis because he was lying to you. That takes guts. Sienna looked at him for a long moment. Why did you say something? Back in the meeting. You could have just walked away. I don't know, Landon admitted. I saw the numbers and I couldn't just let it go. Even though it wasn't your problem. Yeah, even though. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Landon said. This time, Sienna did smile. It was small and tired, but it was real. Thank you, Landon. I mean it. You didn't have to do any of this. You're welcome. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Not quite dawn yet, but close enough that the darkness didn't feel as absolute. Somewhere below them, the city was waking up. Delivery trucks were making their rounds. Early morning commuters were boarding trains. The world kept turning, indifferent to the small miracle that had just occurred on the 43rd floor of the Apex Tower. Karen poked her head into the room. "Sienna, the lawyers are on the phone. They want to talk about next steps." Sienna stood and smoothed down her jacket. "Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes. She looked at Landon. "Go home. Get some sleep. You've earned it." "What about my job?" Landon asked. "I kind of disappeared in the middle of my shift." "I'll talk to building management," Sienna said. "You won't have any problems." Landon nodded and stood to leave. He made it halfway to the door before Sienna called his name. "Landon?" He turned back. "You said you used to do financial analysis. Why did you stop?" The question hit harder than he'd expected. For a moment he considered lying, making up something about burnout or career changes or wanting to try something new. But Sienna had been honest with him tonight, brutally so, and he figured he owed her the same. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said. "Cancer. The treatment was expensive, and we didn't have great insurance. After she passed, I had medical debt, funeral costs, and a daughter to raise on my own. I couldn't afford to keep working days because I needed to be there when she got home from school. So I found night work instead. It pays the bills, barely." Sienna's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "It is what it is," Landon said, which was what he always said when people offered condolences. It was easier than explaining that sorry didn't fix anything. "How old is your daughter?" 8. Her name's Maya." "She's lucky to have you." Landon thought about Maya asleep in their tiny apartment, curled up under the second-hand blankets with her inhaler on the nightstand, and felt something tighten in his chest. "I hope so." He left before the conversation could get any heavier. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, like the building was reluctant to let him go. By the time he reached the ground floor, the security guard was already looking at him funny. "Heard you got pulled into something upstairs," the guard said. "Yeah," Landon said. "Something like that. You in trouble?" "I don't think so." The guard nodded slowly. "Well, if you are, don't come crying to me. I just work here." Landon walked out into the cold Chicago morning and pulled his jacket tighter against the wind. His car was parked 3 blocks away in a lot where the overnight rate was cheaper. He should go home, shower, maybe grab an hour of sleep before Maya woke up and demanded pancakes. But instead he stood there on the sidewalk and looked up at the Apex Tower, its glass facade reflecting the pale orange glow of sunrise. Somewhere up there, Sienna Vale was preparing to go to war with one of the most powerful corporations in the country, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, Landon wanted to know how that war turned out. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept the call anyway. "Mr. Pierce?" It was Sienna's voice. "Yeah?" "I know you're probably exhausted, but I need to ask you something." "Okay. Would you be willing to come back tomorrow night? I'm going to need help rebuilding the financial oversight systems, and I trust you more than anyone else in this building right now." Landon closed his eyes. He thought about Maya, about the bills stacking up on their kitchen counter, about the fact that one night of playing detective didn't change the reality of their situation. "I can't do tomorrow night," he said. "I have to be home with my daughter." "What about during the day?" What?" "Come work for me," Sienna said. "Temporary contract, financial consulting. I'll pay you what you're worth, not what the cleaning company does." "You don't even know what I'm worth." "I know you saved my company," Sienna said. "That's worth more than whatever you're making now." Landon didn't know what to say. The offer was insane, generous to the point of being suspicious. But when he opened his mouth to turn her down, what came out instead was, "How much are we talking?" Sienna named a number that made his knees weak. That's more than I used to make at my old firm," he said. "Then they were underpaying you. Do we have a deal?" Landon thought about Maya's asthma medication, about the overdue rent notice, about the collection agency threatening to garnish his wages, about the fact that for the first time in 3 years, someone was offering him a way out of the hole he'd been drowning in. "Yeah," he said. "We have a deal." "Good. Come to my office at 9 a.m. We'll work out the details then." She hung up before he could second-guess himself. Landon stood there in the empty street, holding his phone and trying to process what had just happened. 12 hours ago, he'd been nobody. A guy with a mop and a dead-end job and a daughter who deserved better than what he could give her. Now he was, what? A consultant? A temporary employee? A person who mattered? He didn't know. But as he walked back to his car through the cold Chicago morning, Landon Pierce allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maya was already awake when Landon got home, sitting cross-legged on the couch in her pajamas with a bowl of cereal balanced on her knees. She looked up when he walked in, her dark hair sticking up in about 15 different directions. "You're late," she said. "I know. Sorry, kiddo." Landon dropped his keys on the counter and tried to remember the last time he'd felt this exhausted. Something came up at work. "You smell like coffee." "Yeah, well, it was a long night." Maya studied him with the kind of unnerving intensity only 8-year-olds could manage. "Are you in trouble?" "No. Actually, the opposite." Landon sat down beside her and stole a piece of cereal from her bowl. "I might have a new job. A better one." "Better than mopping?" "Definitely better than mopping." "Does it pay more?" Landon hesitated. Maya was too young to understand their financial situation in detail, but she was old enough to know they were always broke. She'd stopped asking for things months ago, new clothes, toys, trips to the movies, because she'd figured out that asking just made him feel worse. "Yeah," he said. "It pays a lot more." "Good." Maya went back to her cereal like the conversation was over. "Mrs. Chen says I need new shoes for gym class. Mine have a hole." "I'll get you new shoes. Like this week?" "Yeah, this week." Maya looked at him again, skeptical. Then she shrugged and turned on the TV, some cartoon about talking dogs. Landon watched it with her for a few minutes, not really processing what was happening on screen, until exhaustion finally dragged him toward the bedroom. He set his alarm for 8 a.m. 2 hours of sleep wasn't nearly enough, but it was what he had. When the alarm went off, Landon felt like he'd been hit by a truck. He showered, shaved, and dug through his closet until he found the one suit he still owned, a charcoal gray thing he'd bought for job interviews 4 years ago. It was a little loose now. He'd lost weight since Emma died, the kind of weight loss that came from forgetting to eat and running on coffee and adrenaline. Maya was eating toast when he came back out. She looked him up and down. "You look weird," she said. "Thanks. Why are you wearing that?" "Meeting. For the new job." "Oh." She took another bite of toast. "Am I going to Mrs. Rodriguez's house?" Mrs. Rodriguez was their neighbor, a retired teacher who watched Maya during the day when Landon needed to sleep or run errands. She charged $20, which was less than any actual daycare, but still more than Landon could consistently afford. "Yeah," Landon said. "Just for a few hours. I'll pick you up after lunch." "Okay." Maya grabbed her backpack, stuffed with library books and a battered Nintendo DS, and headed for the door. Landon followed her down the hall to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment and waited until the older woman answered, smiling and ushering Maya inside with promises of cookies. Then he got in his car and drove back to the Apex Tower. The building looked different in daylight, less imposing somehow. Just another glass structure in a city full of them. Landon parked in the visitor lot this time, feeling strange about using the spot now that he wasn't technically a maintenance worker anymore. The security guard from last night was gone, replaced by a younger guy who barely glanced at Landon as he walked through the lobby. He took the elevator to the 43rd floor. His hands were sweating. The executive suite was quieter during the day. A few assistants sat at desks outside closed office doors, typing away on sleek computers. One of them looked up when Landon approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Sienna Vale. She's expecting me." The assistant checked her computer, then nodded. "Mr. Pierce?" "Yeah." "Go ahead. Last door on the left." Sienna's office was bigger than Landon's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, and the furniture looked like it had been custom-made by someone who charged by the inch. Sienna herself was standing by the windows with her phone pressed to her ear, talking in rapid-fire sentences that Landon couldn't quite follow. She waved him in without breaking stride in her conversation. "Don't care what the optics are, Marcus. If your client wants to salvage anything from this disaster, he'll cooperate with the SEC investigation. Otherwise, I'm happy to let the federal prosecutors handle it. She paused, listening. That's not a threat. It's a promise. She hung up and turned to face Landon. Today she was wearing a different suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, and her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look older than 26, more severe. You came, she said. You offered me a lot of money. Fair enough. Sienna gestured to one of the chairs in front of her desk. Sit. We need to talk. Landon sat. The chair was more comfortable than it had any right to be. Sienna settled into her own chair and pulled out a folder. I had my lawyers draw up a contract last night. Temporary consulting position, renewable on a monthly basis. Starting salary is what I quoted you on the phone, plus benefits and a discretionary bonus structure tied to company performance. She slid the folder across the desk. Landon opened it and started reading. The contract was straightforward, more straightforward than he had expected, honestly. No hidden clauses, no weird non-compete agreements, just a clean offer for honest work. This is generous, he said. You saved my company from being gutted by corporate raiders, Sienna said. Generous is the least I can do. I pointed out some bad numbers. That's not exactly saving the world. You did it when nobody else would. Sienna leaned back in her chair. Do you know how many people saw those financial reports before you did? Dozens. Executives, analysts, our entire accounting department, and not one of them noticed what you spotted in 5 minutes. Maybe they didn't want to notice. Exactly. Sienna's expression hardened, which is why I need someone I can trust, someone who isn't invested in protecting the old guard. Landon looked down at the contract again. The salary was real. The benefits were real. It was everything he needed and more than he'd hoped for in 3 years of scraping by. What happens when the month is up? He asked. We evaluate. If it's working, we extend. If it's not, we part ways professionally and you get a severance package. Either way, you're better off than you were yesterday. It was hard to argue with that logic. Landon signed the contract. Sienna smiled, a real smile this time, not the polished corporate version. Welcome aboard, Mr. Pierce. Landon's fine. Landon, then. She stood and walked over to a cabinet near the windows, pulling out a bottle of something expensive-looking. Want a drink? It's 9 in the morning. It's been a rough 12 hours. She poured 2 glasses anyway and handed one to Landon. He took it, feeling surreal about the whole situation. Yesterday he'd been mopping these floors. Today he was drinking scotch that probably cost more than his car. To second chances, Sienna said, raising her glass. Landon clinked his against hers. Second chances. The scotch burned in the best possible way. Sienna set her glass down and turned serious again. Okay, now for the hard part. The SEC is opening a formal investigation into Richard and the shell companies, but that's going to take months. In the meantime, I need to stabilize the company and prove to our investors that we're not a sinking ship. How bad is it really? Landon asked. Bad. The fraud accounts for a significant chunk of our losses, but not all of it. We expanded too aggressively last year, took on debt we couldn't service, and bet big on a product launch that underperformed. Even with the stolen money recovered, we're still looking at major restructuring. What kind of restructuring? Layoffs, division closures, possibly selling off some of our IP to raise capital. Sienna rubbed her temples. The board wants me to bring in a turnaround specialist, someone with experience managing companies in crisis. That doesn't sound unreasonable. It's not. But the person they want to bring in is someone I don't trust. And after what just happened with Richard, I'm not inclined to hand control over to another so-called expert who might have their own agenda. Landon could see where this was going. You want me to audit the company's finances, figure out exactly where we stand. I want you to do more than that, Sienna said. I want you to help me rebuild the oversight systems from the ground up. New approval processes, new vendor verification, new controls that make it impossible for someone to pull what Richard did ever again. That's a massive project. I know, but I think you can do it. Why? Landon asked. You barely know me. Sienna looked at him for a long moment. Because you didn't have to say anything last night. You could have walked away, kept your head down, stayed invisible. But you didn't. You saw something wrong and you spoke up, even though it wasn't your problem and even though it could have gotten you fired. She paused. People like that are rare, especially in my world. Landon didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and finished his scotch. They spent the next 3 hours going through the company's financial systems in excruciating detail. Karen joined them around 11, bringing coffee and a stack of reports that made Landon's head spin. The more they dug, the clearer it became that Richard's scheme was just one symptom of a much larger problem. The company had grown too fast, hired too carelessly, and built systems that prioritized speed over accuracy. "This is going to take months to fix properly," Landon said, staring at the disaster unfolding across 3 different monitors. "We don't have months," Sienna said. "We have weeks, maybe." "Then we prioritize. Focus on the biggest vulnerabilities first and work our way down." "Which vulnerabilities?" Landon pulled up a spreadsheet and started flagging line items. "Vendor management, for starters. We need a centralized system that verifies every company we do business with. Real addresses, real tax IDs, real people. No more shell companies slipping through the cracks." "What else?" "Approval workflows. Right now, too many people have unilateral authority to approve major expenses. We need multiple sign-offs for anything over a certain threshold." Karen was taking notes furiously. "What threshold?" "I'd say 50,000 to start. We can adjust based on what makes sense operationally." "That's going to slow things down," Sienna said. "Yeah, it will. But it'll also make it harder for someone to rob you blind." Sienna nodded slowly. "Okay. What else?" They kept working. Somewhere around 1 p.m., someone brought in sandwiches. Landon ate without tasting anything, too focused on the numbers scrolling past. By 3 p.m., they had a rough framework for the new oversight systems and a timeline that was ambitious, bordering on delusional. "This assumes we have the staff to implement it," Karen said, looking at the timeline skeptically. "We don't." "Then we hire," Sienna said. "With what budget?" "We'll find the budget." Karen looked like she wanted to argue, but Sienna's expression made it clear the discussion was over. She gathered up her notes and left, muttering something about impossible deadlines. Sienna turned to Landon. "You need to go pick up your daughter." He blinked, surprised she remembered. "Yeah, I should probably—" "Go. We can pick this up tomorrow." Landon stood, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle back over him now that the adrenaline was fading. "Same time?" "Same time. And Landon?" He turned back. "Thank you. For today. For all of this." "You're paying me," Landon said. "You don't need to thank me." "I'm paying you for your work," Sienna said. "I'm thanking you for giving a damn." Landon left before he could say something stupid. The elevator ride down felt shorter this time, like the building had accepted his presence. By the time he got to his car, his phone was buzzing with a notification. Direct deposit confirmed. The first half of his signing bonus had already hit his account. He sat in the driver's seat and stared at the number on his screen. It was more money than he'd seen in one place in 3 years. He could pay rent, buy Maya new shoes, refill her prescriptions without having to choose between medication and groceries. Landon closed his eyes and let himself feel it. The relief, sharp and overwhelming. Then he started the car and drove to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment to pick up his daughter. Maya was on the couch when he arrived, playing her DS with the kind of intense concentration she usually reserved for avoiding homework. She looked up when he walked in. "You're early," she said. "Meeting went well. Thought we could do something fun." "Like what?" "I don't know. Get ice cream, go to the park. Whatever you want." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" "Because you're being weird." Landon laughed, surprised by how good it felt. "I got the job, Maya. The good one I told you about." "Oh." She saved her game and put the DS away. "Does that mean we're not poor anymore?" The question hit him harder than it should have. "We were never poor, kiddo. We were just between things." "Mrs. Rodriguez says poor people say stuff like that." "Mrs. Rodriguez talks too much." Maya grinned. "She says that too." They got ice cream at the place 2 blocks from their apartment, the kind with the checkered floors and the ancient cash register that still took coins. Maya ordered mint chocolate chip in a waffle cone. Landon got vanilla because he was too tired to make complicated decisions. They sat outside on the plastic chairs and watched people walk by. It was a nice day, sunny but not too hot, with the kind of breeze that made Chicago tolerable in early summer. "Dad?" Maya said, licking ice cream off her fingers. Yeah? Are you going to keep working nights? No, this job is during the day. So you'll be home at night? Yeah, I'll be home. Maya nodded, processing this. Good. I don't like it when you're gone. Landon felt something twist in his chest. I know. I'm sorry. It's okay. You were working. She took another bite of ice cream. But I'm glad you're going to be home now. Me too, kiddo. They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence. Then Landon took Maya to the park, where she spent an hour on the swings while he sat on a bench and tried not to fall asleep. By the time they got home, it was almost 6 p.m., and Landon's entire body felt like it was made of lead. Pizza for dinner? He asked. Can we afford it? Yeah, we can afford it. Maya's face lit up. With extra cheese? With extra cheese? He ordered from the place that delivered, tipped the driver more than he normally would have, and they ate in front of the TV while some animated movie played in the background. Maya fell asleep halfway through, curled up against his side with pizza sauce on her chin. Landon carried her to bed, tucked her in, and stood in the doorway for a long moment watching her breathe. For 3 years, he'd been running on fumes, working himself to exhaustion just to keep them afloat, wondering how long he could sustain it before something broke. Maybe things were finally turning around. The next morning, Landon was back at the Apex Tower by 8:30. He'd actually managed 6 hours of sleep, which felt like a luxury. Sienna was already in her office when he arrived, surrounded by printouts and looking like she hadn't left. Did you sleep? Landon asked. A little. Coffee? Please. She poured him a cup from the machine in the corner. Real coffee, not the break room sludge he was used to. It tasted like heaven. We have a problem, Sienna said, settling into her chair. The board met last night. They want to move forward with the Hexagon acquisition. Landon nearly choked on his coffee. What? Even after everything we found? They don't care. Or rather, they care more about stabilizing the stock price than about justice. Sienna's jaw was tight. They're arguing that the fraud proves we can't manage ourselves, that we need outside intervention. That's insane. That's corporate politics. Sienna pulled up an email on her monitor and turned it so Landon could see. This is from our lead board member. He's calling for a vote next week to approve the sale. Landon scanned the email. The language was careful, diplomatic, but the message was clear. Sell now or watch the company collapse. What are you going to do? He asked. Fight it. But I need ammunition. Sienna looked at him. How fast can you put together a recovery plan? Something concrete that shows we can turn this around without selling. How detailed? Detailed enough to convince 12 board members that I'm not delusional. Landon thought about the timeline they'd sketched out yesterday. It was aggressive, but possible. Maybe. Give me 3 days. You have 2. Sienna, 2 days, Landon. After that, the vote happens, and it's out of my hands. He wanted to argue, tell her it was impossible. But something about the look in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't asking because she enjoyed making unreasonable demands. She was asking because she was out of options and running out of time. Okay, Landon said. 2 days. They worked like people possessed. Landon pulled in Karen and 2 junior analysts, dividing up the research and building financial models that showed every possible path forward. Some scenarios were optimistic. Others were brutal. All of them required sacrifices, layoffs, asset sales, debt restructuring. By the end of the first day, Landon's eyes felt like sandpaper and his brain was mush. But they had a draft. Rough, incomplete, but enough to build on. Go home, Sienna said around midnight. You're useless when you're half asleep. You're still here. I'm always here. She rubbed her face. Go. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Landon drove home through empty streets, his mind still churning through numbers. Maya was asleep when he got in. Mrs. Rodriguez had stayed late. He'd have to pay her extra for that. He collapsed into bed, still wearing his clothes. The second day was worse. The models kept breaking. The assumptions kept shifting. Every time they thought they had a viable path forward, some new complication emerged. By 6 p.m., Landon was ready to throw his laptop out the window. This isn't working, he said. Sienna looked up from her own screen, dark circles under her eyes. What do you mean? I mean, we're trying to solve too many problems at once. We need to focus. On what? Landon pulled up the company's product portfolio. This, your core business, the tech that actually makes money. Everything else is just noise. We can't just abandon entire divisions. We can if it means survival. Landon highlighted 3 product lines that were hemorrhaging cash. These are dead weight. They're never going to be profitable. Cut them loose, reallocate the resources to the products that work, and suddenly the numbers start making sense. Sienna stared at the screen. That's 600 jobs. I know. Those are people, Landon, people with families. I know, he said again, quieter this time. But if the company goes under, everyone loses their job. At least this way, some people keep theirs. Sienna closed her eyes. For a moment, Landon thought she might cry. Then she opened them again and nodded. Do it. Rebuild the model around the cuts. It took 4 more hours, but they got there. A recovery plan that was painful but viable. 3 divisions closed, 600 employees laid off, 2 major assets sold. But the company survived. Leaner, smaller, but alive. It's not pretty, Landon said, sliding the final presentation across the desk. No, Sienna agreed. But it's honest. She looked at him. You did good work here. We did good work. Right. She managed a small smile. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. the following day. Sienna spent the morning rehearsing her presentation, pacing her office, while Landon listened and offered suggestions. She was good, better than he'd expected, clear, direct, unwilling to sugarcoat the hard truths. At 1:30, they walked down to the boardroom together. It was the first time Landon had been in this part of the building. Everything was dark wood and expensive art, designed to intimidate. You don't have to come in, Sienna said. This is my fight. I know, but I want to see how it ends. She nodded, and they went in together. The board members were already seated around a massive table, 12 people in expensive suits, most of them at least twice Sienna's age. They looked up when she entered, their expressions ranging from skeptical to outright hostile. Ms. Vale, the lead board member said. His name was Gerald, and he had the kind of voice that suggested he was used to being obeyed. We weren't expecting a guest. Mr. Pierce is my financial consultant, Sienna said smoothly. He'll be presenting our recovery plan. I thought we were voting on the Hexagon offer. You are, after you hear the alternative. Gerald's expression soured, but he gestured for them to proceed. Sienna pulled up the presentation on the large monitor at the end of the room. She started with the fraud, laid out exactly what Richard had done and how much it had cost the company. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Then she moved into the recovery plan, the cuts, the restructuring, the timeline for returning to profitability. The numbers were ugly. There was no way around that. But they were real, and they showed a path forward that didn't involve selling to the same people who'd tried to destroy them. When she finished, the room was silent. Finally, Gerald spoke. This plan requires significant capital investment up front. Where's that money coming from? Debt financing, Sienna said. We've already had preliminary conversations with 2 lenders who are interested. At what interest rate? Higher than I'd like, but manageable. Another board member leaned forward. And if the recovery doesn't happen on schedule? If the market doesn't respond the way you're projecting? Then we revisit our options, Sienna said, but at least we'll have tried to save what my father built instead of handing it over to vultures. Your father built a failing company, Gerald said coldly. You're asking us to gamble on sentiment. I'm asking you to gamble on competence, Sienna shot back. Mine and Mr. Pierce's. We found the fraud. We built this plan. Give us a chance to prove it works. The board members exchanged glances. Landon could feel the room tilting, but he wasn't sure which direction. We'll need to discuss this, Gerald said finally. In private. Sienna nodded. Of course. She and Landon stepped outside. The hallway felt cold after the warmth of the boardroom. Sienna leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. That went well, Landon said, trying for optimism. Did it? You didn't back down. That counts for something. Maybe. She opened her eyes. Or maybe I just made everything worse. They waited. 20 minutes. 30. Landon's phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Rodriguez asking when he'd be home. He sent back a quick reply and tried not to think about how much overtime he was racking up. Finally, the boardroom door opened. Gerald stepped out, his expression unreadable. "We've reached a decision," he said. Sienna straightened. "And?" "We're willing to table the hexagon vote, for now, but there are conditions." "What conditions?" "You implement the recovery plan exactly as presented. No deviations. And if the company doesn't show meaningful progress within 6 months, we revisit the sale. Non-negotiable." Sienna's jaw tightened. "Fine. One more thing. Mr. Pierce." Gerald turned to look at Landon. "The board wants you officially appointed as Chief Financial Officer, interim basis, subject to performance review." Landon's stomach dropped. What?" "You built the plan. You'll oversee its execution. That's the deal." He looked at Sienna. She looked just as surprised as he felt. "Okay," Landon heard himself say. "I'll do it." Gerald nodded and went back inside. The door closed with a heavy click. Sienna turned to Landon. "Did that just happen?" "I think so." "You're my CFO now." "Apparently." She started laughing, not the polite corporate laugh, but something real and slightly unhinged. Landon found himself laughing too, the absurdity of the situation finally catching up to him. "This is insane," Sienna said, wiping her eyes. "You were mopping floors 4 days ago. And you were about to sell your company to the people trying to destroy it. Fair point." She sobered. "Think we can actually pull this off?" Landon thought about the numbers, the timeline, the 600 people who were about to lose their jobs because of decisions he'd helped make. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I guess we're going to find out." The announcement went out the next morning. Internal memo, carefully worded, explaining the restructuring in language designed to soften the blow. 3 divisions closing, 600 positions eliminated, a new interim CFO appointed to oversee the transition. Landon read it on his phone while sitting in his car outside Maya's school. The words looked sterile on the screen, clinical. They didn't capture what it actually meant, that 600 people were about to walk into work and discover their lives had been upended. His phone started ringing before he'd even made it back to the office. Karen first, then 2 department heads he'd never met. Then someone from HR asking about severance packages. By the time he reached his new office, Richard's old office, which felt wrong in about 15 different ways, there were already people waiting in the hallway. "Mr. Pierce?" A woman in her 40s wearing a blazer that had seen better days. "I'm Susan Morris. I manage the Consumer Products Division, the one you're shutting down." Landon's stomach twisted. "I'm sorry, I know this isn't—" "Save it," Susan said, but her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "I need to know the timeline. When do we tell our teams? What's the severance package? How long do they have to clear out?" 2 weeks' notice. Standard severance based on tenure. HR will have the details by end of day." 2 weeks? Susan laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's generous." She walked away before Landon could respond. 3 more people took her place almost immediately, all with the same questions, the same exhausted anger in their eyes. By noon, Landon felt like he'd aged a decade. Sienna found him around 1 p.m., sitting at Richard's desk. His desk now, he supposed, staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked. Define okay. She came in and closed the door. "I know this part sucks, believe me, I know." "Do you?" The words came out harsher than Landon intended. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I just destroyed 600 lives to save a company I barely understand." "You saved the company," Sienna said quietly, "which means you saved the other 2,000 jobs that would have disappeared if we'd gone bankrupt. I know that doesn't make it easier, but it's true." Landon rubbed his face. "I had a guy in here this morning, 53 years old, been with the company for 20 years. He wanted to know if his pension was safe." "Is it?" "Barely. If we hit our targets, yeah. If we don't—" Landon trailed off. "I told him it should be fine. I have no idea if that's true." Sienna sat down across from him. "This is the part they don't teach you in business school. The human cost. The people who aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. Did you go to business school?" "Stanford. Dropped out after a year." She smiled faintly. "Turns out inheriting a company is a faster education." "Must have been hard, losing your father and getting thrown into this." "It was." Sienna's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her face before she locked it down again. He had a heart attack in his office, just collapsed during a meeting. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was already gone. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything. She straightened. Point is, I learned pretty quickly that running a company means making choices that hurt people. The trick is making sure those choices actually mean something. And if they don't, then you live with it anyway. She left him alone after that. Landon spent the rest of the afternoon fielding calls and emails, trying to manage a crisis that felt like it was expanding faster than he could contain it. By 6 p.m., he was ready to walk out and never come back. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Maya's asking when you'll be home. She wants to show you something. Right. He had a daughter, a life outside this office. Landon grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. He was halfway to the parking garage when someone called his name. Mr. Pierce! He turned, a young guy, maybe 25, jogging to catch up. Landon recognized him from the Consumer Products Division, one of the engineers. Can I help you? Landon asked. The guy was breathing hard, like he'd run up several flights of stairs. I wanted to say thank you. Landon blinked. For what? For not selling. I know we're getting cut, but at least you tried to save the company instead of just handing it over to Hexagon. That means something. I'm not sure the other 600 people would agree. Maybe not. But some of us get it. The engineer stuck out his hand. Good luck, Mr. Pierce. I hope you pull it off. Landon shook his hand, too surprised to say anything else. The guy nodded and walked away, leaving Landon standing alone in the hallway, feeling like he'd just been punched in the chest. Maya was waiting on the couch when he got home, her DS abandoned beside her, and a piece of paper clutched in her hands. You're late again, she said. I know. Sorry, kiddo. It's okay. Mrs. Rodriguez let me have cookies. She held up the paper. Look what I made in art class. It was a drawing, stick figures in front of a tall building. One figure was small with pigtails. The other was taller, wearing what looked like a tie. That's us, Maya explained. At your new job. You're wearing your fancy clothes. Landon felt something crack open inside his chest. It's perfect. Can we put it on the fridge? Yeah, absolutely. He hung the drawing with a magnet shaped like a pizza slice, then ordered actual pizza for dinner because he was too exhausted to cook. They ate on the couch again, Maya chattering about her day while some sitcom played in the background. Normal. Easy. The kind of evening Landon had been too tired to appreciate for the past 3 years. Dad, Maya said during a commercial break. Yeah? Are you happy? At the new job? Landon thought about Susan Morris and the engineer and the 600 people whose lives he'd just upended. It's complicated. That's what grown-ups say when the answer is no. It's what grown-ups say when the answer is both yes and no at the same time. Maya frowned, processing this. That doesn't make sense. Welcome to being a grown-up, kiddo. She went back to her pizza, apparently satisfied with that answer. Landon watched her eat and wondered how he was supposed to explain that sometimes doing the right thing felt terrible, and sometimes the choices that saved people also destroyed them. The layoffs started the following week. HR set up meetings in conference rooms on the lower floors, processing people in groups of 10. Landon stayed in his office and tried not to think about what was happening 20 floors below. But the emails kept coming. Questions about benefits, requests for reference letters, angry messages from people who felt betrayed. One email stood out. It was from a woman named Patricia Huang, one of the senior managers in the division they'd cut. Short, professional, thanking Landon for being honest about the company's situation instead of sugarcoating it. She'd already found a new job and wanted him to know there were no hard feelings. Landon read it 3 times, then saved it in a folder he labeled Reasons to Keep Going. By the end of the second week, the cuts were complete. The office felt emptier, quieter, like a building recovering from surgery. Morale was in the basement, productivity had tanked, and Landon was trying to hold everything together with spreadsheets and determination. The real work started after that. Restructuring debt, renegotiating contracts with suppliers, pitching the recovery plan to skeptical investors. Landon spent 14-hour days buried in financial models while Sienna handled the public-facing side, press conferences, analyst calls, reassuring everyone that the company wasn't about to implode. They developed a rhythm. Mornings were for strategic planning, afternoons for putting out fires, evenings for reviewing the damage, and figuring out how to do better tomorrow. Somewhere in the chaos, they stopped being boss and employee and became something closer to partners. You ever think about doing something else? Sienna asked one night, both of them still in the office at 10 p.m. Like what? I don't know. Something easier, less stressful. Landon laughed. I was mopping floors 3 weeks ago. This is already easier. Is it though? He considered that. No, but it matters more. Sienna nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. She'd taken off her heels hours ago and had her feet tucked under her on the couch in her office. She looked younger like this, less polished, more real. Can I ask you something? Landon said. Sure. Why did you really hire me? I mean, yeah, I spotted the fraud, but you could have brought in any consultant, someone with credentials, experience, connections. Instead, you hired a guy who'd been out of the industry for 3 years. Sienna was quiet for a moment. You want the honest answer? Always. Because everyone else in my life has an agenda. The board wants control. The executives want power. The investors want returns. You were the first person in years who just wanted to help without expecting something in return. I'm expecting a paycheck. You know what I mean. She met his eyes. You're one of the only people in this building I actually trust. That's worth more than credentials. Landon didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to his laptop, feeling the weight of that trust settle over him like a blanket. The first real crisis hit in week 4. One of their major clients, a healthcare company that accounted for 15% of their revenue, announced they were switching to a competitor. The news broke during lunch, and by the time Landon saw it, the stock price had already dropped 8%. He was in Sienna's office within minutes. Have you seen this? I'm on the phone with them now. She had her cell pressed to her ear, her expression tight. Yes, I understand your concerns, but I think if we could meet in person. She paused, listening. I see. Well, thank you for the courtesy of the call. She hung up and threw her phone onto the couch. They're gone. Contracts void in 30 days. Did they say why? The restructuring spooked them. They don't think we're stable enough to handle their data long term. Sienna pressed her palms against her desk. We needed that contract, Landon. Without it, the numbers don't work. Landon's mind was already racing through options. We replace them. Find a new client. Someone bigger. In 30 days? We don't have a choice. Sienna looked at him. You're serious? Do I look like I'm joking? She almost smiled. No, you look terrified. Good instinct. They spent the next 2 days building a pitch. Something aggressive, ambitious, designed to show potential clients that the company wasn't dying. It was evolving. Sienna identified 3 targets, all of them larger than the client they'd lost. Landon built financial projections showing what they could deliver. The first pitch was a disaster. The client listened politely, asked pointed questions about the layoffs, and then passed without explanation. The second pitch went better, but ended with a "we'll think about it" that sounded like a polite no. The third pitch was with a massive retail corporation looking to overhaul their entire tech infrastructure. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon in their downtown headquarters. Sienna and Landon showed up 30 minutes early, both of them exhausted and running on coffee. You ready for this? Sienna asked in the elevator. Not even a little bit. Good, me neither. The presentation room was intimidating, all glass walls and minimalist furniture. The client's team consisted of 5 people, including a CTO who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Sienna started the pitch, clean, confident, walking through their capabilities and track record. Landon backed her up with the financial data, showing return on investment and implementation timelines. They made a good team, he realized. Sienna handled the vision, he handled the numbers, and together they told a story that actually made sense. The CTO interrupted halfway through. I'm going to stop you there. We've heard this pitch from 4 other companies. Why should we choose you? Sienna didn't hesitate. Because we're hungry. Every other company you're talking to is comfortable. They're established, stable, playing it safe. We can't afford to play it safe, which means we'll work harder, move faster, and deliver better results than anyone else. That sounds like desperation, not confidence. It's both, Sienna said. And if you're smart, you'll use that to your advantage. The room went quiet. Landon held his breath, waiting for the CTO to tell them to leave. Instead, she smiled. I like that. Send me the full proposal by Monday. We'll review it and get back to you. They walked out of the building in a daze. Sienna didn't say anything until they were back in her car. Did that just happen? She asked. I think so. We might actually land them. Don't jinx it, she laughed, and Landon realized it was the first time he'd heard her laugh in weeks. Really laugh, not the corporate version she used in meetings. You're good at this, she said, pulling out of the parking garage. At what? All of it. The numbers, the pitches, the impossible timelines. You've been doing this for a month, and you're already better than half the executives I inherited. I'm just trying not to screw up. Same thing. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Sienna spoke again, quieter this time. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever resent me for pulling you into this mess? Landon thought about it. Honest answer. Sometimes. When I'm working 18-hour days and my daughter's asleep before I get home, yeah, I resent it. I'm sorry. Don't be. I also get to pay my rent without choosing which bills to ignore. Maya's going to a better school next year. I'm not afraid to open my mail anymore. He paused. So, yeah, sometimes I resent it, but mostly I'm just grateful. Sienna nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm grateful too. I don't think I could do this without you. You'd figure it out. Maybe, but it would be a lot harder. She dropped him off at his apartment building. Landon watched her drive away, then headed upstairs to find Maya already asleep and Mrs. Rodriguez watching a telenovela in Spanish. Long day? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. You have no idea. She ate dinner, did her homework, only cried a little when you weren't home by bedtime. The guilt hit like a punch. She cried? She's 8. She misses her father. Mrs. Rodriguez patted his arm. But she's proud of you too. She tells me about your fancy job, how you're helping people. Landon paid her and waited until she left before going into Maya's room. His daughter was sprawled across the bed, one arm hanging off the side, her mouth slightly open. He adjusted her blanket and kissed her forehead. I'm trying, kiddo, he whispered. I'm really trying. The proposal went out Monday morning. By Wednesday, they had a response. The retail corporation wanted to move forward with a pilot program. Not the full contract, but enough to replace the revenue they'd lost, and then some. Sienna called an emergency meeting with the executive team. We have 30 days to deliver a working prototype. Everything else gets put on hold. That's impossible, one of the department heads said. Then we do the impossible, Sienna shot back, because if we don't, we're back where we started. The next month was brutal. Landon worked longer hours than he'd thought possible, coordinating between engineering, finance, and operations to make sure the prototype came in on time and under budget. He started keeping a sleeping bag in his office for the nights when going home didn't make sense. Maya stopped asking when he'd be home. Mrs. Rodriguez started charging overtime, and Landon could feel himself becoming the kind of father he'd sworn he'd never be, absent, distracted, more focused on work than his daughter. It came to a head on a Tuesday night. Landon had promised to be home for dinner, actually promised, not just vaguely agreed. But a crisis emerged at 4 p.m., something about the prototype failing a critical test, and by the time he looked at his phone again, it was 9:30. He had 6 missed calls from Mrs. Rodriguez and 3 texts from Maya. Where are you? You promised I hate this. Landon's stomach dropped. He called Mrs. Rodriguez, who informed him coldly that Maya had cried herself to sleep and maybe he should think about his priorities. He left the office immediately, drove home too fast, let himself into the apartment and found Maya's door closed. He knocked softly. Maya, you awake? No answer. Landon opened the door anyway. Maya was in bed, facing the wall. Go away, she said. I'm sorry, kiddo. I got caught up at work. You're always caught up at work. She rolled over to glare at him. You said we'd have dinner together. You promised. I know. I messed up. You always mess up now. Tears were streaming down her face. I liked it better when you were home, even if we were poor. At least you were here. The words hit harder than anything Landon had experienced in the past 2 months. All the stress, the impossible deadlines, the weight of 2,000 jobs resting on his shoulders, none of it compared to the look on his daughter's face. You're right. he said quietly. I've been a terrible father lately. I didn't say terrible, but you're thinking it. Maya wiped her eyes. I just miss you. Landon sat down on the edge of her bed. I miss you too, and I'm going to do better. I promise. You promised about dinner. I know, and I broke that promise, but this one I'm going to keep. He took a breath. Starting tomorrow, I'm home by 6 every night. No exceptions, even if the building's on fire. What if it's a really big fire? Then I put it out faster. Maya almost smiled. That's dumb. Yeah, well, I'm pretty tired. Landon brushed hair out of her face. I'm sorry, Maya. Really sorry. Okay. She scooted over and, can you stay until I fall asleep? Yeah, I can stay. He lay down next to her, both of them squeezed onto her small bed. Maya curled against his side, and Landon felt something in his chest unclench. This was what mattered. Not the company, not the contracts, not the impossible deadlines. This. Maya fell asleep within minutes. Landon stayed for another hour, just listening to her breathe, before finally extracting himself and heading to his own room. His phone was full of messages from work. He ignored all of them. The next morning, Landon walked into Sienna's office at 7 a.m. and told her he was leaving at 6 every night, no exceptions. She looked up from her laptop. We're in the middle of the biggest month of the company's existence. You can't just... Yes, I can, and I have to. Landon sat down. My daughter cried herself to sleep last night because I wasn't there. Again, I'm not doing that to her anymore. Sienna's expression softened. Landon, I'll work faster. I'll delegate better. I'll come in earlier if I have to. But at 6 p.m., I'm walking out that door. If that's a problem, we need to figure something else out. Sienna studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay. Okay. You're right. I've been pushing too hard. We both have. She closed her laptop. 6 p.m., both of us. You don't have to... Sham, if my CFO gets work-life balance, so do I. That's the deal. Landon felt relief wash over him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have 3 weeks to deliver this prototype. Then we better make them count. They did. The next 3 weeks were intense but manageable. Landon learned to delegate tasks he'd been trying to handle alone. Sienna started trusting her department heads more. And every evening at 6 p.m., both of them walked out of the office together. Landon made it home for dinner every night. Some nights they had pizza. Some nights he actually cooked. But he was there, and that was what mattered. Maya's anger faded. The drawings on the fridge multiplied. The prototype launched on schedule. The retail corporation was impressed enough to offer a full contract, 3 years, worth more than the client they'd lost. The stock price started climbing. Investor confidence returned. At the 6-month mark, Landon sat in the boardroom while Gerald reviewed their progress. Revenue was up. Costs were down. The company was profitable for the first time in 18 months. You've done good work, Ms. Vale, Gerald said grudgingly. Both of you. Sienna caught Landon's eye across the table. He could see the exhaustion there, but also something else. Pride, maybe. Relief. Does this mean the Hexagon deal is off the table? She asked. For now, Gerald said. Assuming you can maintain this trajectory. We will. The board meeting ended. Sienna and Landon walked back to her office together. We did it, she said quietly. Yeah, we did. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet. There's still so much to fix. Sienna. She stopped. Take the win, Landon said. Just for today. She smiled. Okay, just for today. They stood there in her office, the Chicago skyline stretching out behind them, and for the first time in 6 months, Landon let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The relief lasted exactly 3 days. On Monday morning, Landon walked into his office to find 2 federal agents waiting outside his door. They wore suits that looked cheaper than anything the executives wore, and their expression suggested this wasn't a social visit. Landon Pierce? The taller one asked. Yeah, can I help you? FBI, we need to ask you some questions about Richard Chen and the financial fraud case. Landon's stomach dropped. I already gave a statement to the SEC investigators, twice. This is different. New evidence has emerged. The agent gestured toward the office. Can we talk inside? They spent 2 hours going through everything Landon had found. The shell companies, the wire transfers, the emails between Richard and Hexagon Industries. The agents took notes, asked clarifying questions, and revealed nothing about why they were suddenly interested in a case that had seemed closed months ago. Are we done? Landon asked finally. Almost. The shorter agent leaned forward. We need to ask about your relationship with Ms. Vale. My relationship? How would you characterize it? Professional? Personal? Landon felt warning bells going off in his head. Professional. She's my boss. But you spend significant time together, often alone. Late nights, business trips, private meetings. We run a company together. That's how it works. The agent nodded slowly. And you've never discussed the investigation outside of official channels? Never coordinated your stories? What are you implying? We're not implying anything, Mr. Pierce. Just making sure we have all the facts. They left without explaining what facts they were looking for. Landon sat at his desk feeling sick. Something was wrong. The questions had been too pointed, too focused on his relationship with Sienna. He found her in the conference room, reviewing quarterly projections with Karen and 2 department heads. She looked up when he knocked. Can I borrow you for a minute? Landon asked. Sienna must have seen something in his expression because she stood immediately. Give us the room. The others filed out. Landon closed the door. FBI was just here, he said. Sienna's face went pale. What did they want? They asked about the fraud case, but they also asked about us, our relationship, whether we'd coordinated our statements. That doesn't make sense. We already cooperated with the investigation. I know, but something's changed. Landon pulled out his phone and checked the news. Nothing about the company, nothing about Richard. They wouldn't just show up unless they had a reason. Sienna sat down heavily. Richard's lawyers must be pushing back, trying to create doubt about the evidence. Or someone's trying to implicate us in the fraud. That's insane. We're the ones who exposed it. Doesn't matter if they can muddy the waters enough, make it look like we had something to gain. Landon didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Sienna's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression tightened. It's our lawyer. She answered, listened for a moment, then put it on speaker. Cannot stress enough how serious this is, the lawyer was saying. The U.S. Attorney's Office is apparently looking at potential securities fraud charges. Not against Richard, against you and Mr. Pierce. That's ridiculous, Sienna said. We didn't commit fraud, we stopped it. I understand that, but they're arguing that you benefited from the scheme, that the restructuring and layoffs were designed to cover up your own mismanagement, and you used Richard as a convenient scapegoat. Landon felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Who's making this argument? Hexagon's legal team. They've filed a civil suit alleging conspiracy to defraud investors. The federal investigation is likely a result of that filing. Of course it is, Sienna said bitterly. They failed to buy us out, so now they're trying to destroy us through the courts. Can they actually make this stick? Landon asked. The lawyer hesitated. Probably not. But they don't need to win. They just need to create enough uncertainty that your investors panic and the stock price crashes. Then they swoop in with another acquisition offer. How do we fight this? Carefully. I'm going to need everything, every email, every document, every conversation you've had about the restructuring. We need to prove that you acted in good faith and that Richard's scheme was real. We have all of that, Landon said. I documented everything. Good. Send it to me today. And in the meantime, do not talk to anyone about this. Not the press, not the FBI, not even your own employees. Everything goes through me. The lawyer hung up. Sienna and Landon sat in silence. This is bad, Sienna said finally. Yeah. If the stock crashes again, the board will force the sale. Gerald's been looking for an excuse to get rid of me since my father died. We won't let that happen. How? Sienna looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely scared. How do we fight a federal investigation in a civil suit while trying to run a company? Landon didn't have an answer, so he did what he always did when the numbers didn't make sense. He started digging. The rest of the week was a nightmare. The lawsuit hit the news on Wednesday, and the stock price dropped 12% before the market closed. Investors started calling, demanding explanations. The board scheduled an emergency meeting, And through it all, Landon and Sienna had to keep pretending everything was fine. Landon spent every spare moment going through documents, building a timeline that proved they'd acted properly. He found purchase orders, approval chains, communication logs, everything that showed the fraud was real and their response was legitimate. But doubt crept in anyway. Late at night, alone in his office, Landon found himself wondering if they'd missed something. Some detail that could be twisted to make them look guilty. He'd been so focused on saving the company that he hadn't thought about protecting himself. On Thursday, Maya brought home a permission slip for a school field trip. Science Museum, $40, due next week. "Can I go?" she asked over dinner. "Of course." "Are you sure? Mrs. Rodriguez says we need to be careful with money again." Landon looked at his daughter. "Did Mrs. Rodriguez say why?" "She heard something on the news about your company. She said it sounded bad." Perfect. Now his 8-year-old was worrying about federal investigations. "It's going to be fine," Landon said, with more confidence than he felt. "Just some people trying to cause trouble. It'll blow over." Promise? He thought about all the promises he'd broken over the past 6 months. The late nights, the missed dinners, the times he'd said he'd be there and wasn't. "Yeah," he said, "I promise." Maya seemed satisfied with that. Landon wished he could be. The emergency board meeting happened Friday afternoon. Landon and Sienna sat at one end of the massive table while Gerald and the other board members peppered them with questions about the lawsuit, the investigation, the falling stock price. "This is exactly the kind of instability we were trying to avoid," Gerald said. "The company can't survive this kind of scrutiny." "The company will survive if you stop panicking," Sienna shot back. "Hexagon is manufacturing this crisis. Don't play into their hands. Whether it's manufactured or not doesn't matter. The damage is real." Gerald pulled up a chart showing the stock price. "We've lost 18% of our value in 3 days. Investors are bailing. If this continues—" "It won't continue," Landon interrupted. "We're cooperating fully with the investigation. We have documentation proving everything we did was legitimate. This will resolve itself. And if it doesn't, then we deal with it. But we don't panic, and we don't sell to the people trying to destroy us." Gerald's expression hardened. "With all due respect, Mr. Pierce, you've been CFO for 6 months. Some of us have been managing corporate crises for decades. Perhaps you should defer to experience." "Experience didn't catch Richard Chen's fraud," Landon said. "I did. So maybe experience isn't worth as much as you think." The room went silent. Landon could feel Sienna's eyes on him, but he kept his focus on Gerald. "We're adjourning this meeting," Gerald said coldly. "The board will reconvene Monday to discuss next steps. Miss Vale, Mr. Pierce, you're excused." They walked out together. Sienna didn't say anything until they were in her office with the door closed. "That was either really brave or really stupid," she said. "Probably both. Gerald's going to push for your removal. You know that, right? Let him try." Landon sat down on her couch, suddenly exhausted. "I'm not going to sit there and let him steamroll us into selling. He might not give you a choice. If the board votes to replace me, the new CEO will clean house. You'll be gone within a week. Then we make sure they don't vote to replace you." Sienna sat down beside him. "How?" "Same way we beat Hexagon the first time. We prove they're lying." "We don't have months, Landon. We have days." "Maybe. Then we work fast." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what's funny? 6 months ago, I was ready to give up. Sell the company, walk away, start over somewhere else. Now I can't imagine letting it go." "Why not?" "Because it means something now. Before it was just my father's company, his legacy, his failure." She paused. "But we turned it around, you and me. We saved it. And I'm not letting anyone take that away." Landon understood exactly what she meant. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about proving they could do something that mattered. That they weren't just survivors scraping by. They were builders creating something real. "We'll figure it out," he said. "You keep saying that." "Because I keep believing it." Sienna looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. "I'm glad you're here. I know I don't say it enough, but I am." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Sienna's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. "It's Karen. She says we need to see something. Now." They found Karen in the IT department, surrounded by computer monitors and looking grim. "What is it?" Sienna asked. "Someone's been accessing our financial systems from an external IP address." Karen pulled up a log showing dozens of unauthorized login attempts. "They've been trying to get into the same databases you used to find Richard's fraud." "When did this start?" Landon asked. 3 days ago, right after the lawsuit was filed." "Hexagon," Sienna said. "They're looking for something to use against us." "Or planting something," Landon said. "If they can't find evidence of fraud, they'll create it." Karen nodded. "That's what I'm worried about. I've locked down everything I can, but if they have insider help—" "Who has access to those systems?" Sienna demanded. "Department heads, senior management, IT staff." Karen pulled up a list. "About 40 people total." Landon scanned the names. Most he recognized. A few he didn't. "Can you track which accounts they were trying to access?" "Already did. They targeted 3 specific accounts, all belonging to executives who were let go during the restructuring." "They're looking for disgruntled employees," Landon said. "Someone willing to testify that we acted improperly." "Or someone willing to falsify documents," Sienna added. She turned to Karen. "I want those 3 people brought in for interviews. Today. And I want a full security audit of our systems. If there's a leak, I need to know about it." Karen nodded and hurried off. Sienna sagged against the wall. "This is getting out of control," she said quietly. "We knew they'd fight back." "I know. I just didn't think they'd be this aggressive." She looked at Landon. "What if we can't stop this? What if they actually manage to frame us?" "Then we go down swinging." "That's not reassuring." "It's not supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be honest." Sienna almost smiled. "You're terrible at pep talks." "Yeah, well, I'm a CFO, not a motivational speaker." The interviews happened that evening. 2 of the 3 former employees were cooperative, if bitter. They confirmed they'd been contacted by someone claiming to represent Hexagon's legal team, offering money in exchange for testimony about improper conduct during the restructuring. Both had refused. The 3rd employee didn't show up. Karen tracked him down through his forwarding information and discovered he'd been hired by Hexagon 2 weeks ago as a consultant in their acquisitions department. "They bought him," Landon said, staring at the employment records. "More than that," Karen said. "I checked his access logs. He downloaded copies of internal financial documents the day before he left, including emails between you and Sienna about the restructuring. Can we prove he gave them to Hexagon?" "Not directly, but the timing is suspicious as hell." Landon felt rage building in his chest. "They're building a case using stolen documents and bought testimony." "Welcome to corporate warfare," Sienna said bitterly. "This is how it works when you threaten powerful people." She called their lawyer and relayed what they'd found. The lawyer promised to file a motion to suppress any evidence obtained through the former employee, but warned it could take weeks to get a ruling. "We don't have weeks," Sienna said after hanging up. "Then we go on offense," Landon said. "Stop defending and start attacking." "How?" "We expose them. Find proof that Hexagon orchestrated Richard's fraud in the first place. If we can show the lawsuit is part of a larger conspiracy, the investigation falls apart." "We already tried that. We found the emails between Richard and Marcus Webb, but they were vague enough to maintain plausibility deniability. So we dig deeper, find the money trail. Someone at Hexagon funded Richard's scheme. We just need to prove it." Karen looked skeptical. "That would require accessing Hexagon's financial records, which we definitely don't have permission to do." "No," Landon said slowly, "but I bet the SEC does. They're investigating Richard. If we give them reason to look at Hexagon's finances, they might find the connection themselves," Sienna finished. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling our contact at the SEC. If we can point them in the right direction without directly asking them to investigate—" "That's a fine line to walk," Karen warned. "Everything about this situation is a fine line." Sienna started dialing. "We're running out of options." The call lasted 20 minutes. Sienna was careful, professional, never quite asking the SEC investigator to look at Hexagon, but making sure he understood there might be something worth looking at. When she hung up, she looked drained. "He'll consider it. That's all I got." "It's a start," Landon said. "Is it?" Because from where I'm sitting, we're still losing, the stock's still falling, the board's still panicking, and Hexagon's still coming after us with everything they have. Landon didn't have a response to that. She was right. They were losing. His phone rang. Maya's school. "I need to take this," he said, stepping into the hallway. "Hello?" "Mr. Pierce, this is Principal Morrison. Maya's fine, but we need you to come pick her up." His heart jumped. "What happened?" "She got into a fight with another student. She's not hurt, but we have a zero-tolerance policy. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and went back into the office. Sienna looked up. "Everything okay?" "Maya's school. I have to go." "Go. We can handle this." Landon grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. His hands were shaking. Maya had never been in a fight before. She was quiet, careful, the kind of kid who avoided conflict. The school was 15 minutes away in good traffic. Landon made it in 12. He found Maya sitting outside the principal's office, her arms crossed and her face red. "Hey, kiddo," he said, sitting down beside her. "You want to tell me what happened?" "Tommy Martinez said you're a criminal, that you're going to go to jail and I'm going to end up in foster care." Landon felt his stomach turn. "And what did you do?" "I pushed him. He fell down. Then I tried to kick him, but Miss Peterson grabbed me. Maya, he said mean things about you." Her voice cracked. "He said you're bad, and you did bad things, and everyone knows it because it was on the news." Landon pulled her into a hug. She was crying now, 8 years old and terrified that her father was going to disappear. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "I promise. What they're saying on the news, it's not true. Some people are lying about me and Sienna because they want to hurt our company. But what if they win? What if you do go to jail?" "I won't, because we're going to prove they're lying." Maya pulled back and wiped her eyes. "Promise?" There it was again. That word, promise. The same word he'd been throwing around for months, hoping he could keep his commitments this time. "Yeah," he said. "I promise." Principal Morrison emerged from her office. They had a brief conversation about Maya's behavior, about zero-tolerance policies and consequences. Landon apologized, promised it wouldn't happen again, and took his daughter home. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting when they arrived. She took one look at Maya's face and ushered her inside, promising cookies and cartoons. Landon's phone buzzed. Text from Sienna. SEC investigator called back. "They're opening an inquiry into Hexagon's relationship with Richard. We might actually have a shot." Relief washed over him, quickly followed by exhaustion. He texted back. "Good. Talk tomorrow." He went inside and found Maya on the couch, a cookie in one hand and the TV remote in the other. "Dad?" she said without looking at him. "Yeah? Are you going to quit your job? If it's making people say bad things about you?" Landon thought about everything that had happened over the past 6 months. The late nights, the impossible deadlines, the federal investigation, his daughter getting into fights because other kids thought he was a criminal. He should quit. Walk away. Find something simpler, safer, less likely to blow up his life. But he thought about Sienna, standing alone in that conference room 6 months ago, about to lose everything. He thought about the 2,000 people still working at the company because he and Sienna had refused to give up. He thought about Maya's drawing on the fridge, stick figures in front of a tall building. "No," he said, "I'm not quitting." "Why not?" "Because sometimes you have to fight for things that matter. Even when it's hard. Even when people say mean things." He sat down beside her. "Your mom taught me that." Maya looked at him. "She did?" "Yeah. She fought really hard when she was sick, even when she knew she probably wouldn't win, because fighting mattered more than winning." "Do you miss her?" "Every day?" "Me too." Maya leaned against him. "But I'm glad I have you." Landon wrapped his arm around his daughter and pulled her close. "I'm glad I have you too, kiddo." They sat like that for a long time, watching cartoons neither of them cared about, just being together. And for a moment, the investigation and the lawsuit and the falling stock price didn't matter. For a moment, Landon had everything he needed. Monday morning brought news that changed everything. The SEC investigator had moved fast, faster than anyone expected. Over the weekend, they'd obtained warrants for Hexagon's financial records and discovered something massive, a series of shell companies identical to the ones Richard had used, all funneling money back to Hexagon's acquisition division. The implications were staggering. Hexagon hadn't just worked with Richard to sabotage the company. They'd been running the same scheme against multiple targets, using fraud to tank stock prices, then buying the wreckage cheap. By noon, Hexagon's CEO had resigned. By 2 p.m., federal prosecutors had announced criminal charges. By the time the market closed, Hexagon's stock had dropped 40%, and their lawsuit against Sienna and Landon had been withdrawn. It was over. Landon sat in his office watching the news coverage and feeling numb. 6 months of fighting, 6 months of impossible hours and federal investigations, and his daughter crying because other kids called him a criminal. And now it was just done. Sienna appeared in his doorway. "You see?" "Yeah, I saw." "We won." She said it like she couldn't quite believe it. "We won." She walked in and sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Sienna started laughing, really laughing, the kind that came from relief so profound it had nowhere else to go. Landon found himself laughing too. Exhausted, slightly unhinged laughter that probably would have worried anyone walking past his office. "We actually did it," Sienna said, wiping her eyes. "We actually beat them." "Yeah, we did." She looked at him. "I couldn't have done this without you. You know that, right?" "Same." "I'm serious, Landon. 6 months ago, I was hours away from losing everything. Now we're profitable, growing, and the people who tried to destroy us are the ones facing prison time. Feels surreal." "It really does." Sienna stood. "Come on. We're getting the whole company together, announcing the news properly, and then we're all going home early for the first time in 6 months." They gathered everyone in the main atrium, nearly 2,000 people, packed together and buzzing with rumors about what had happened. Sienna stood on the second-floor balcony and waited for the crowd to quiet. 6 months ago," she said, her voice carrying across the space, "this company was dying. We'd been sabotaged, betrayed by people we trusted, and pushed to the brink of collapse. A lot of you lost your jobs during the restructuring. For that, I'm truly sorry. But those of you who stayed, you helped us rebuild something stronger than what we had before." She paused. "Today, the people who tried to destroy us were the ones who fell. Hexagon Industries is facing criminal charges. Their lawsuit against us has been dropped, and this company is moving forward stronger than ever." The crowd erupted. People were cheering, hugging, some crying. Landon watched from the side, feeling disconnected from the celebration. Sienna caught his eye and waved him over. He shook his head, but she wasn't taking no for an answer. "Get up here," she mouthed. Reluctantly, Landon joined her on the balcony. The crowd's cheering got louder. "This man," Sienna said, putting a hand on his shoulder, "saved this company. Not once, but dozens of times over the past 6 months. He worked harder than anyone I've ever met. He never gave up, even when things looked impossible. So if you're going to celebrate anyone today, celebrate him." Landon felt his face go hot. He wasn't good at this, being the center of attention, accepting praise. He'd spent 3 years being invisible. This was the opposite of invisible. "Thank you," he managed, "all of you, for trusting us, for staying, for helping us prove that doing the right thing actually matters." More cheering. Someone started chanting his name. Landon wanted to disappear. Sienna mercifully dismissed everyone, declaring the rest of the day an unofficial holiday. The atrium cleared quickly, people heading home or to happy hours, basking in the first good news they'd had in months. Landon and Sienna went back to her office. She poured 2 glasses of the expensive scotch. "To surviving," she said. "To surviving." They drank. The scotch still burned, but in a good way. "What happens now?" Landon asked. "Now we actually run the company, without fighting off corporate raiders or federal investigations." Sienna smiled. "Should be boring." "I could use boring. Liar. You'd be miserable." She was probably right. Landon's phone buzzed. Text from Maya. "Mrs. Rodriguez says the news says good things about you now. Does that mean I can tell Tommy Martinez you're not a criminal?" He smiled and typed back, "Yes, but please don't kick him." "Okay, fine." "Everything okay?" Sienna asked. "Yeah, my daughter wants to gloat to the kid who called me a criminal." "Smart kid." "She has her moments." Landon set down his glass. "I should get going. Promised Maya we'd do something fun tonight." "Go, you've earned it." Landon stood to leave, then hesitated. Sienna? Yeah? Thank you for taking a chance on a guy mopping floors. Thank you for being worth the chance. He left feeling lighter than he had in months. The drive home was easy, traffic cooperating for once. Maya was waiting when he arrived, bouncing with barely contained energy. Can we celebrate? She asked. Mrs. Rodriguez says we should celebrate. What do you want to do? Ice cream, and the park, and maybe pizza. That's a lot of celebrating. You won against bad guys. That's worth a lot. Landon laughed. Okay, ice cream, park, and pizza it is. They spent the evening doing exactly that. Maya got mint chocolate chip again. They went to the park and she made Landon push her on the swings until his arms ached. They got pizza with extra cheese and ate it while watching a movie neither of them paid attention to. It was perfect, simple and perfect, and exactly what Landon needed. That night, after Maya was asleep, Landon sat on their small balcony and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Sienna was probably doing the same thing from her expensive penthouse. 6 months ago, neither of them could have imagined this. The maintenance worker and the heiress saving a company and beating corporate criminals. It sounded like something from a movie, not real life, but it had been real. The fear, the exhaustion, the impossible odds, all of it real. And somehow, they'd won. Landon's phone buzzed one more time. Text from Sienna. Thank you again for everything. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start building something that lasts. He smiled and typed back, see you tomorrow. Then he went inside, checked on Maya one more time, and finally let himself sleep without worrying about what disaster might be waiting in the morning. For the first time in 6 months, tomorrow felt like a promise instead of a threat. Tomorrow came faster than Landon expected. He woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit, his body still programmed for crisis mode, even though the crisis had technically ended. Maya was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and her homework spread out in front of her. You're up early, Landon said. I wanted to finish before school. She didn't look up from her math worksheet. Mrs. Rodriguez says I should get good grades so I can go to college like you did. Landon poured himself coffee and sat down across from her. Mrs. Rodriguez says a lot of things. She's usually right, though. Yeah, she usually is. He watched Maya work through her problems, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. She looked so much like Emma in moments like this. The same stubborn focus, the same refusal to ask for help until she'd exhausted every option on her own. Dad? Maya said, still focused on her worksheet. Yeah? Are things going to be normal now, like actually normal? Landon thought about what normal meant. Before Emma died, normal had been stability, routine, a future he could predict. After she died, normal became survival, getting through each day without falling apart completely. And for the past 6 months, normal had been chaos dressed up as opportunity. I don't know if things are ever really normal, he said. But they're going to be better, I promise. Maya looked up. You promise a lot. I know, I'm trying to get better at keeping them. She seemed to accept that and went back to her homework. Landon finished his coffee and got ready for work, putting on the same charcoal suit he'd worn that first day in Sienna's office. It fit better now. He'd gained back some of the weight he'd lost, started eating regular meals again. The drive to the Apex Tower felt different, less urgent, less like he was racing toward the next disaster. When he walked into his office, there were no federal agents waiting, no emergency meetings scheduled, no crisis that needed solving in the next 4 hours. It felt strange, almost wrong. Sienna knocked on his door around 9. Got a minute? Sure. What's up? She came in and closed the door, which immediately made Landon nervous. In his experience, closed-door conversations never brought good news. Relax, Sienna said, reading his expression. It's not bad. At least I don't think it is. That's not reassuring. Yeah, you've mentioned I'm bad at reassuring people. She sat down. I've been thinking about what comes next. For the company, I mean. We're stable now. Profitable. Growing. But we can't just coast on that. Okay, what are you proposing? I want to pivot. Move away from the corporate client model and focus on consumer technology. Build products that actually help people instead of just helping companies make money. Landon leaned back in his chair. That's a massive shift. New development costs, new marketing strategy, completely different revenue model. I know. That's why I'm bringing it to you first, before I pitch it to the board. They're going to hate it. Probably. But I think it's the right move. Sienna pulled out her tablet and showed him a presentation she'd been working on. Look at our consumer division, the one we almost shut down during the restructuring. It's been our fastest growing segment for the past 3 months. People want technology that makes their lives easier, not just their jobs more efficient. Landon studied the numbers. She wasn't wrong. The consumer products were outperforming projections across the board. This would require significant capital investment, he said. R&D, manufacturing partnerships, retail distribution. We're talking hundreds of millions. We have it. Between the recovery and the settlement from Hexagon. Wait, what settlement? Sienna smiled. That's the other thing I wanted to tell you. Hexagon's lawyers reached out yesterday. They want to settle the civil damages from their fraud scheme. They're offering $200 million to avoid a protracted court battle. Landon nearly choked. $200 million? I know. I had the same reaction. She paused. I told them we'd think about it. What's there to think about? That's twice what they stole from us. I know, but part of me wants to take them to court anyway. Make them bleed. That's your anger talking, not your business sense. Maybe. But they tried to destroy us, Landon. They framed us for crimes we didn't commit. They made your daughter get into fights at school because other kids thought you were a criminal. Sienna's voice had gone hard. $200 million feels like letting them off easy. Landon understood the impulse. He'd felt it too, that burning need for revenge against people who'd caused so much pain. But he'd also learned over the past 6 months that revenge was expensive and rarely satisfying. Take the money, he said. Use it to build something that matters. That's better revenge than any court case. Sienna looked at him for a long moment. You're probably right. I'm definitely right, she laughed. When did you get so wise? Around the same time I started mopping your floors. They spent the rest of the morning refining the consumer technology pitch. By lunch, they had something solid enough to present to the board. Not perfect, nothing ever was, but good enough to start a conversation. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. This time, Landon wasn't nervous walking in. He'd faced down federal investigators and corporate raiders. A room full of skeptical executives felt manageable by comparison. Gerald was already seated when they arrived, looking as stern as ever. The other board members filtered in slowly, making small talk and checking their phones. Let's begin, Gerald said once everyone was settled. Ms. Vale, I understand you have a proposal. I do. Sienna pulled up the presentation on the main monitor. I want to pivot the company toward consumer technology, focus on products that help people in their daily lives. She walked through the market analysis, the revenue projections, the capital requirements. Landon backed her up with financial models showing how they could fund the transition without taking on excessive debt. The board members listened quietly. A few took notes. Gerald's expression gave away nothing. When they finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Finally, one of the board members, a woman named Patricia who'd always been skeptical of Sienna, spoke up. This is ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. We just recovered from near bankruptcy. Is now really the time to take on this kind of risk? It's exactly the time, Sienna said. We have momentum. We have capital. We have a team that's proven they can execute under impossible conditions. If we don't move now, we'll lose the opportunity. And if it fails? Gerald asked. Then we adjust. But I'd rather fail trying to build something meaningful than succeed at playing it safe. Gerald studied her. You sound like your father. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I haven't decided yet. He looked around the table. All in favor of allowing Ms. Vale to proceed with developing a detailed implementation plan? 7 hands went up. 5 stayed down. Motion passes, Gerald said. You have 3 months to present a full business case. If it's viable, we'll approve the capital allocation. Sienna nodded, keeping her expression neutral. Thank you. They left the boardroom together. Once they were out of earshot, Sienna let out a breath. That went better than expected, she said. Gerald voted yes. That's significant. I know. I think he's finally starting to trust me. Or he's just tired of fighting. Either way, we got what we needed. Sienna checked her phone. I have calls with potential manufacturing partners for the rest of the afternoon. You good to handle the quarterly reports? Yeah, go build your consumer empire. She smiled and headed toward her office. Landon went back to his own, pulled up the financial reports, and settled in for several hours of spreadsheets. His phone buzzed around 4. Text from Maya's school. Reminder: parent-teacher conferences next Tuesday. Please confirm your attendance. Landon checked his calendar. Tuesday afternoon was the quarterly investor call, one of the most important events of the quarter. He hesitated, then typed back, "Confirmed. I'll be there." Then he sent a message to Karen. "Need you to handle the investor call Tuesday afternoon. Something came up with Maya's school." Her response came back immediately. "No problem. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just need to be a dad for a few hours." "Good. You've earned it." That evening, Landon made it home by 6:30. Maya was doing homework again, but this time Mrs. Rodriguez was sitting with her, helping with a reading assignment. "You're early," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "Figured I'd try this being home for dinner thing more often." "Good. This one misses you when you're gone." She patted Maya's shoulder and gathered her things. "I'll see you tomorrow, Pequeña." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Landon and Maya made dinner together. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Nothing fancy, but better than takeout. They ate at the table instead of in front of the TV. "How was school?" Landon asked. "Fine. Tommy Martinez tried to say sorry for calling you a criminal, but I told him I'm still mad." Maya: "What? He was mean. He doesn't get to just say sorry and have it be okay." Landon suppressed a smile. "That's actually fair, but eventually you should accept his apology." "Why?" "Because holding on to anger makes you tired, and Tommy's probably feeling bad enough already." Maya considered this while chewing her grilled cheese. "Did you accept the apology from the bad company, the one that tried to hurt you?" "They didn't apologize. They just offered money." "Did you take it?" "Not yet, but I probably will." "Why, if they didn't say sorry?" It was a good question, one Landon had been asking himself all day. "Because the money can help a lot of people," he said, "and sometimes that matters more than getting an apology." "That seems unfair." "Yeah, a lot of things are unfair, but we do the best we can anyway." Maya seemed to accept this wisdom, or at least decided to file it away for later consideration. They finished dinner, and Landon helped her with the rest of her homework. Math problems he actually understood, and a book report about a story involving talking animals. Later, after Maya was asleep, Landon sat on the balcony again. The city stretched out before him, millions of lives intersecting in ways they'd never know about. 6 months ago, he'd been one of those invisible people, working through the night while the world slept, trying to hold his life together with minimum wage and determination. Now he was the CFO of a billion-dollar company. He had a salary that let him pay bills without anxiety. He had influence, respect, a future that looked nothing like what he'd imagined a year ago. But he was also still just a guy trying to raise his daughter and keep his promises and do the right thing when the right thing wasn't always obvious. His phone buzzed. Text from Sienna. "Manufacturing partner fell through. The good one, not the backup. This is going to be harder than I thought." Landon called her instead of texting back. "You okay?" he asked when she answered. "Yeah, just frustrated. I thought we had this locked down." "So we find another partner, or we bring manufacturing in-house?" "In-house would cost twice as much." "Then we find the budget, same way we always do, by being scrappy and refusing to give up." Sienna laughed tiredly. "Is that our company motto now? Scrappy and refusing to give up?" "Could be worse." "True. We could be Hexagon." "Too soon." "Yeah, probably." She paused. "Thanks for this, for talking me down. That's what partners do." "Is that what we are? Partners?" Landon thought about it. "Yeah, I think so. You're the vision, I'm the numbers. Together, we make something that actually works." "I like that." Another pause. "Hey, Landon." "Yeah?" "I'm glad you were mopping my floors that night. I'm glad you spoke up when nobody else would. I'm glad—" She stopped. "I'm just glad you're here." "Me too." They hung up. Landon sat on the balcony for a while longer, thinking about partnership and second chances and the strange ways life sometimes worked out. The next 3 months were intense but manageable. Sienna found a new manufacturing partner, better than the first one, actually. Landon secured the capital allocation from the board and structured the financing to minimize risk. The consumer technology division hired 30 new engineers and opened a development lab in Austin. Maya's parent-teacher conference went well. Her teacher said she was bright, engaged, sometimes struggled with focus, but always tried her best. Landon felt proud in a way that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or stock prices. The settlement with Hexagon was finalized. $200 million paid out over 3 years. Landon wanted to put it all into reserves, but Sienna had a different idea. "I want to create a foundation," she said one afternoon, standing in his office with that look that meant she'd already made up her mind. "What kind of foundation?" "For single parents, people who are where you were, working multiple jobs, drowning in medical debt, trying to give their kids a future when they can barely afford the present." Landon felt something catch in his throat. "That's a good idea. I'm going to fund it with half my share of the settlement, $100 million to start. Scholarships, emergency grants, job training programs, all the things that could have helped you 3 years ago." "You don't have to do this." "I know, but I want to. You saved my company, Landon. Let me help save some people who are in the same position you were." He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. The foundation launched 4 months later. Sienna asked Landon to be on the board of directors. He agreed, with the caveat that he couldn't work the same insane hours he had during the crisis. "I have a daughter to raise," he said. "That comes first." "Good," Sienna said. "That's exactly the kind of priority the foundation should be modeling." They settled into a rhythm. The company continued growing, but at a sustainable pace. Landon's role shifted from crisis management to strategic planning. He still worked hard, but he also made it home for dinner most nights. He attended Maya's school events. He took actual weekends off. One Saturday morning, about 8 months after Hexagon's collapse, Sienna called him out of the blue. "Are you busy?" she asked. "Depends. Why?" "I'm at the foundation office. We're reviewing grant applications, and I could use a second opinion." "It's Saturday." "I know, but this is important, and I'll buy you lunch." Landon looked at Maya, who was watching cartoons on the couch. "You want to go see where I work?" "The foundation, not the company." Maya perked up. "Can I?" "Sure. Bring your DS." They met Sienna at the foundation office, a renovated warehouse in a neighborhood that was slowly gentrifying. Inside, the walls were covered with photos of families the foundation had helped, single parents going back to school, kids getting medical treatment they couldn't afford, people rebuilding their lives after loss. "This is amazing," Landon said, looking around. "It's just getting started." Sienna noticed Maya. "Hey, you must be Maya. I've heard a lot about you." Maya studied Sienna with that unnerving kid intensity. "You're my dad's boss." "More like his partner, but yeah, I guess I am." "He talks about you a lot." Landon felt his face go red. "Maya, what?" "You do." She turned back to Sienna. "He says you're really smart and sometimes stubborn, but in a good way." Sienna laughed. "That's probably accurate." They spent the next few hours going through applications. Stories of people struggling the way Landon had struggled. Medical bills, impossible choices, the constant weight of financial insecurity. Some they could help immediately. Others they had to put on a waiting list. It was harder than Landon expected, reading these stories. Seeing his own pain reflected in strangers' words. "You okay?" Sienna asked quietly while Maya was distracted with her DS. "Yeah, just hitting close to home. We can take a break?" "No, I want to do this." Landon looked at her. 3 years ago, I was writing letters just like these, begging for help from organizations that probably threw them away because there were too many people and not enough money. If we can actually help some of these people, then your story means something bigger than just survival. Yeah, exactly. They approved grants for 12 families that day. Scholarship money, emergency medical funds, job training programs. Small amounts in the grand scheme of things, but life-changing for the people receiving them. As they were leaving, Maya tugged on Landon's sleeve. "Dad?" "Yeah, kiddo." "This is really cool, what you and Miss Sienna are doing." "You think so?" "Yeah, it's like..." She struggled to find the words. "It's like you're helping people not be sad and scared like we used to be." Landon felt his eyes sting. "That's the idea." "Good. Because being sad and scared sucks." "Language," Landon said automatically. "Sorry, but it does." Sienna drove them to lunch at a burger place Maya picked out. They sat in a booth by the window, Maya between them, chattering about school and her friends, and a boy named Marcus who'd pulled her hair. "Did you kick him?" Sienna asked, completely serious. "No, I learned my lesson with Tommy Martinez." Maya dunked a fry in ketchup. "I just told the teacher." "Very mature," Landon said. "I know. I'm growing up." Watching Maya and Sienna interact, Landon realized something he'd been avoiding for months. He liked Sienna, not just as a business partner or a boss, but as a person, someone he wanted in his life beyond quarterly reports and board meetings. The question was whether she felt the same way, and whether acting on it would destroy everything they'd built. He decided to table that question for later. The foundation's first anniversary came faster than expected. They'd helped over 300 families, distributed $4 million in grants, and launched 2 job training programs. Sienna organized an event to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just the foundation staff, some of the families they'd helped, and the board of directors. Landon brought Maya. She wore the dress they'd bought for the school dance, navy blue with white flowers, and spent the evening talking to other kids whose parents had received foundation support. One woman approached Landon near the end of the night. She was probably his age, tired-looking, but smiling. "You're Mr. Pierce, right?" she asked. "Just Landon. Can I help you?" "I wanted to thank you. Your foundation gave my son a scholarship for his asthma medication. We'd been rationing it because I couldn't afford the full prescription." Her eyes filled with tears. "You probably saved his life." Landon felt like he'd been punched. "I'm glad we could help." "No, you don't understand. 3 years ago, I read about your story in the business section. Single parent, medical debt, struggling to keep things together. It was like reading about my own life." She wiped her eyes. "Knowing you made it through gave me hope. And now you're helping people like us. It means everything." She hugged him and walked away before Landon could respond. He stood there feeling overwhelmed and oddly fragile. Sienna found him a few minutes later. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Someone just thanked me for saving their kid's life." "That'll do it." She stood beside him, both of them watching the crowd. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "This is bigger than the company. What we're doing here, helping people rebuild their lives. This matters more than any stock price or quarterly earnings." "Yeah, it does. I want to expand it, double the funding, triple it, use every dollar of that Hexagon settlement to help as many people as we can." Landon looked at her. "That's your entire share. $100 million. I know, but what else am I going to do with it? Buy a bigger penthouse? A yacht?" She shook her head. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. At least this way, it actually helps people." "You're serious." "Completely." Landon thought about the woman who'd thanked him, about Maya learning that money could be used to help instead of just to survive, about all the families still out there struggling the way he'd struggled. "Okay," he said, "let's do it." They announced the expansion that night, $100 million dedicated to helping single parents rebuild their lives. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya grabbed Landon's hand and squeezed. "You're a good dad," she whispered. "I try, kiddo." "No, I mean it. You're really good. Mom would be proud." That broke him. Landon pulled Maya into a hug and let himself cry for the first time in months. Not from sadness, but from something else. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Or just the overwhelming realization that somehow, despite everything, they'd made it through. The following year was quieter. The company continued growing. The foundation helped nearly 1,000 families. Landon's role evolved from crisis manager to strategic advisor, which meant more reasonable hours and less stress. He and Sienna fell into an easy partnership that sometimes felt like friendship and sometimes felt like something more. They had lunch together most days. She came to Maya's school events. He helped her pick out furniture for the new foundation office. Maya turned 10. Landon threw her a birthday party, the first real party they'd had since Emma died. 20 kids, pizza, a cake shaped like a unicorn that cost more than Landon used to make in a week. Sienna showed up with a present, a build-your-own robot kit that Maya immediately declared the best gift ever. "You didn't have to do that," Landon said. "I know, but she's important to you, which makes her important to me." They were standing in Landon's tiny kitchen, watching Maya and her friends destroy the living room with wrapping paper and frosting. "Can I ask you something?" Sienna said. "Sure." "Are we ever going to talk about it?" About what? About the fact that I think about you constantly. About how every time something good happens, you're the first person I want to tell. About how I haven't dated anyone in over a year because nobody else is you. Landon's heart was pounding. Siena's. Whoa. Isquenom. I know it's complicated. You're Maya's dad. We work together. If it goes wrong, it could mess up everything we've built. She looked at him. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. Landon thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then he thought about the woman who'd thanked him for saving her son's life. About Maya saying her mom would be proud. About the fact that sometimes the right choice wasn't the safe one. I feel it too, he said quietly. Yeah? Yeah, have for months. I just didn't know if... Sienna kissed him. It was quick, tentative, tasting like birthday cake and possibility. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I should probably go. Let you deal with the sugar-high aftermath of this party. Probably wise. But maybe we could have dinner sometime? Just us? I'd like that. She left, and Landon stood in his kitchen feeling like he'd just jumped off a cliff, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Maya appeared in the doorway, holding her new robot kit. Was that Miss Sienna? Yeah. Did you kiss her? Maya? I saw through the window. It's okay. I like her. Maya paused. Do you love her? The question caught Landon off guard. I don't know yet. Maybe. Is that okay? Maya thought about it with the seriousness of someone twice her age. Mom would want you to be happy, and Miss Sienna makes you happy. So yeah, it's okay. She went back to her friends, leaving Landon alone with his thoughts and the realization that his 10-year-old daughter was wiser than he'd ever been. Dinner with Sienna happened the following week. Nothing fancy, a quiet Italian place where they could actually talk. They spent 3 hours over pasta and wine, talking about everything except work. Her childhood, his marriage to Emma, the strange path that had brought them together. I never thought I'd do this again, Landon admitted. After Emma died, I figured that was it. One great love per lifetime. And now I'm realizing that maybe hearts are bigger than we think, that loving someone new doesn't erase the person you lost. Sienna reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, and that's exactly why this might work. They started dating, though that word felt too small for what they were building. It wasn't just romance, it was partnership, friendship, shared purpose. They kept it quiet at first, not wanting to create office drama. But eventually, people figured it out. Karen cornered Landon one afternoon. So you and Sienna, huh? Is it that obvious? She smiles more. You smile more. Yes, it's obvious. Karen paused. For what it's worth, I think it's good. You're both less intense when you're together. Thanks, I think. The board found out a few months later. Gerald called Landon into a private meeting, which immediately made him nervous. I hear you and Ms. Vale are involved, Gerald said without preamble. That's not against company policy. I'm not concerned about policy. I'm concerned about judgment. Gerald leaned back in his chair. If this relationship affects your ability to make objective decisions about the company, it becomes my problem. It won't. You sound certain. I am. Sienna and I have been making decisions together for 2 years. This doesn't change our professional dynamic. Gerald studied him. Your predecessor had an affair with a board member. It ended badly and cost the company millions in legal fees and settlements. I'm not Richard Chen. No, you're not. Gerald almost smiled. You're better. Don't make me regret saying that. A year after the foundation's expansion, Landon got a letter. It was from Patricia Huang, the woman who'd emailed him after being laid off during the restructuring. She'd gone on to start her own consulting firm and was now working with companies to prevent the kind of fraud Richard had perpetrated. Dear Landon, the letter read, I wanted you to know that losing my job at your company was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to bet on myself instead of playing it safe. I'm happier now than I've been in 20 years, and I have you and Sienna to thank for that. Not everyone who got laid off would say the same thing, but I hope some of them have found similar silver linings. Sometimes destruction is just transformation wearing a scary mask. Landon read the letter 3 times, then saved it in his Reasons to Keep Going folder. That evening, he and Sienna had dinner with Maya at their apartment, the same tiny place Landon had been living in for 5 years, though he could afford to move now. He'd stayed because Maya liked the neighborhood, and Mrs. Rodriguez was right next door. "I've been thinking about something," Sienna said over spaghetti. "Uh-oh," Maya said. "That's never good." "Maya," Landon said, suppressing a smile. "It's true. Last time she was thinking about something, you both worked for like 3 weeks straight." "This is different," Sienna said. "I want to step back from the company. Not completely, but take a less active role. Let the executives I've been training actually run things." Landon set down his fork. "Are you serious?" "Yeah, I've been CEO for almost 6 years. I helped save the company, built the foundation, proved I could do what my father did. But I don't want to do it forever." She paused. "I want to focus on the foundation. Travel. Maybe write a book about what we learned. Live a life that isn't just quarterly earnings and board meetings." "What about me?" "That's up to you. You could stay on as CFO, or you could step back too. We have enough money to do whatever we want." Maya was watching this conversation with rapt attention. "What do you think, kiddo?" Landon asked. "Should your old man retire?" "You're not old, and I don't know what retire means." "It means I'd work less, be home more." "Then yes, obviously yes." Sienna laughed. "She's got good priorities." Landon thought about it. 2 years ago, the idea of walking away from the CFO position would have been unthinkable. But now? Now it felt like a natural evolution. He'd done what he'd set out to do, saved the company, rebuilt the systems, proved he belonged in that world. Maybe it was time to build something else. "Okay," he said, "let's do it." They announced their transition 6 months later. Sienna moved to executive chairman, stepping back from day-to-day operations. Landon took on an advisory role, consulting on major financial decisions but no longer buried in the daily grind. The board was surprisingly supportive. Even Gerald seemed to understand that sometimes the best leaders were the ones who knew when to step aside. The company threw them a joint retirement party, though neither of them was actually retiring, just transitioning. 2,000 employees showed up. People gave speeches about how Landon and Sienna had saved the company, changed the culture, proved that doing the right thing could actually succeed in business. Landon stood on that same balcony where Sienna had announced Hexagon's defeat 2 years earlier, holding Maya's hand and looking out at the crowd, and felt something he hadn't felt since before Emma died. Complete. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. The company still had problems. The foundation still had more applicants than funding. His relationship with Sienna was still new and complicated. Maya still had nightmares sometimes about losing him the way she'd lost her mother. But they were building something, all of them together, something that mattered beyond profits and stock prices. That night, after the party ended and Maya was asleep, Landon sat on the balcony with Sienna. They'd been doing this a lot lately, just sitting in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe. "You know what I realized?" Sienna said. "What?" "Neither of us saved the other. We saved each other." Landon thought about the night he'd walked into that emergency board meeting, about Sienna standing alone, about to sign away everything she had, about how he'd been mopping floors and drowning in debt and one observation away from staying invisible forever. "Yeah," he said. "I think you're right." "I'm always right." "Now you're pushing it." She laughed and leaned against him. "Thank you, Landon, for speaking up that night, for not walking away when things got hard, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for giving a damn about a janitor's opinion. Best decision I ever made." They sat there for a long time watching Chicago glitter in the darkness. Somewhere out there, 300 families were sleeping a little easier because of the foundation. 2,000 people had jobs because they'd refused to give up. And a little girl was dreaming safely in her bed because her father had chosen to be brave instead of invisible. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no dramatic music, no perfect resolution where everything worked out exactly right. Landon still worried about money sometimes, even though he didn't need to. Sienna still had nightmares about losing the company. Maya still asked difficult questions about death and loss, and whether good things could last. But they were together. They were building something that mattered, and they were learning that sometimes the most important victories weren't the dramatic ones. They were the quiet choice to show up every day and try to do better than yesterday. A year later, Landon and Sienna were sitting in a coffee shop reviewing foundation applications when Maya called. "Dad, you need to come to school, now!" Landon's heart jumped. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. But there's a girl here. Her mom just died and she's freaking out and nobody knows what to say to her, and I thought maybe you could help because you get it." Landon looked at Sienna. She was already gathering her things. "We're on our way," he said. They found Maya in the counselor's office with a girl about her age, red-eyed and shaking. The counselor looked relieved to see adults. Landon sat down carefully, keeping some distance. "Hi, I'm Maya's dad. I heard you're having a really bad day." The girl nodded, not speaking. "My wife died when Maya was 6, Landon said quietly. "Cancer. It was the worst thing that ever happened to us, and for a long time I didn't know if we'd make it through." "Did you?" the girl whispered. "Yeah, we did. It took a really long time and a lot of help, and some days I wasn't sure we would, but we did." How? Landon thought about everything that had happened over the past 4 years. The late nights, the impossible choices, the moment he decided to speak up instead of staying silent. "One day at a time," he said, "and by letting people help us. That's the hardest part, I think. Accepting that you can't do it alone." The girl started crying again. Landon let her, understanding that sometimes crying was the only thing that made sense. Eventually, her grandmother arrived to pick her up. The counselor thanked Landon and Sienna for coming. Maya hugged the girl and promised to sit with her at lunch tomorrow. On the drive home, Maya was quiet. "You did a good thing," Landon said, calling me, being there for her. "I just remembered how scared I was when Mom died. How everyone kept saying stupid things that didn't help. I thought maybe you could say something that actually made sense." "Did I?" "I don't know, but at least you tried." That evening, Landon told the story to Sienna over dinner. "You know what that means, right?" she said. "What?" "Your story. Everything you went through. It's helping people you'll never meet. That girl will remember what you said. Maybe she'll pass it on to someone else someday. That's how healing works. We turn our pain into something that helps others carry theirs." Landon thought about that, about how the worst moment of his life, losing Emma, had somehow led to the best parts of his new life. The company, the foundation, Sienna, the chance to help families like the one he'd been. None of it erased the pain. Emma was still gone. He still missed her. Maya still grew up without a mother, but the pain had transformed into something else. Not better exactly, just different, useful maybe. "I think I finally understand," he said. "Understand what? Why we're here. Not just surviving, living, building, helping." Landon took Sienna's hand. "We're not just moving on from the bad things, we're transforming them into something that matters." That's very philosophical for a CFO. Former CFO. "Right. Former." She smiled. "So what now? Now that you've figured out the meaning of life?" "Now we keep going. Keep helping people. Keep building things that matter. Keep showing up for the people who need us." Sounds exhausting. "Yeah, but also worth it." Maya appeared in the doorway, already in her pajamas. "Can we watch a movie? Something funny?" "Sure, kiddo. Pick whatever you want." She chose something animated and ridiculous. They watched it together on the couch, Maya between them, all of them laughing at jokes that weren't that funny but felt good anyway. And Landon realized this was it. This was the ending he'd been working toward for 4 years without knowing it. Not a dramatic victory or a perfect resolution. Just a Tuesday night with his daughter and the woman he loved, watching a silly movie and feeling grateful for the simple fact of being together. The man who'd once been invisible, mopping floors while the world ignored him, had become someone who mattered. Not because he was powerful or wealthy, though he was both now, but because he'd chosen to speak up when silence was easier, because he'd chosen to help when walking away was safer, because he'd chosen to love again when grief felt permanent. And in doing so, he'd helped save not just a company, but hundreds of families, including his own. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything.